Have you ever wondered what would happen if the person whose life you saved turned out to be someone with the power to change your world forever? What if your random act of kindness, something you did without expectation of reward, came back to you 1,000-fold? This incredible true story proves that sometimes the greatest gifts come when we least expect them, from the people we'd never suspect. If you've ever gone above and beyond for someone else and wondered if good deeds really do come back around, this story will restore your faith in humanity. Like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell to never miss another heartwarming story of extraordinary kindness and unexpected rewards. The hallway of St. Agnes Medical Center stretched before Callie Braddock like a white tunnel, gleaming under the harsh overhead lights. At 2:17 a.m., the world outside had gone quiet, but inside these walls, the night pulsed with its own heartbeat. The steady beep of monitors, the squeak of rubber-soled shoes, the occasional murmur from rooms where sleep refused to come. These were the sounds of Callie's world. She paused at the nurse's station, rubbing her eyes. 12 hours into a 14-hour shift, and fatigue clung to her like a second skin. Her chestnut hair was pulled back in a practical bun, wisps escaping to frame her face. At 32, fine lines had begun to appear at the corners of her eyes, testament to too many double shifts and not enough rest. Coffee. Nurse Rodriguez appeared beside her, holding out a steaming cup. Callie accepted with a grateful smile. "You're an angel. Someone's got to look after the ones who look after everyone else." Rodriguez nodded toward the stack of charts. "How many more?" "4 rounds, then I'm out." Callie took a sip, the bitter liquid burning away some of the fog in her brain. "Unless we get another admission." As if summoned by her words, Dr. Patel appeared at the end of the corridor, gesturing urgently. "Braddock, we've got a new patient. Room 418. Critical condition." Callie nodded, abandoning her coffee with a sigh. She'd been a nurse long enough to know that critical meant her shift had just extended itself, whether she liked it or not. Her phone buzzed in her pocket, the 3rd time in an hour. She knew without looking what the notifications would say. Rent due tomorrow. Electric bill past due. Call from Wyatt's College about the tuition payment. Each alert was another weight on her shoulders, another knot in her stomach. But like always, she pushed it down, locked it away. Her problems would have to wait. Someone else's were more immediate. Room 418 was dim when she entered, the only light coming from the monitors that blinked and beeped in steady rhythm. The patient was a man, mid-40s perhaps, with salt and pepper hair and a gauntness that spoke of prolonged illness. According to the chart in her hand, his name was Elliot Mercer. Renal failure. Critical. "Mr. Mercer?" Callie approached the bed, her voice gentle but clear. "I'm Callie, your nurse for tonight." The man turned, his eyes sharp and assessing despite his condition. Something about his gaze made Callie pause. It wasn't just pain she saw there, but a keen intelligence, an awareness that seemed to look right through her. "Callie," he said, his voice surprisingly strong. "That's a good name." She smiled professionally while checking his for. "How are you feeling?" "Like I've been run over by a truck," he replied, a hint of dry humor in his tone. "But I've had worse days." Callie glanced at his chart again. His numbers were concerning, dangerously so. Dialysis had been started, but his kidney function was deteriorating rapidly. Without a transplant soon, his prognosis was poor. "Is there anyone I should call for you? Family? Friends?" He shook his head slightly. "No family. Just me." Those 4 words hung in the air between them. Callie had heard them countless times from countless patients, yet something about the way he said them, without self-pity, just stating a fact, touched her. "Well," she said, adjusting his blanket, "you've got me tonight. And I'm pretty good company, or so I'm told." A ghost of a smile crossed his face. "I believe it." As Callie continued her assessment, she noticed details about Elliot Mercer that seemed at odds with his current state. His hospital gown was standard issue, but the watch on the bedside table was expensive, scratched but unmistakably high-end. His manner was polite, but carried an authority that suggested he was accustomed to being heard. "You're wondering about me," he said suddenly. Callie looked up, caught off guard. "I'm sorry. You're trying to figure me out. Most people do." He shifted slightly, wincing. "I'm not very interesting, I'm afraid. Just a man with bad kidneys." "Everyone's interesting," Callie replied, checking his blood pressure. "Everyone has a story." "And what's yours, Callie?" The question surprised her. Patients rarely asked about her life. She was background noise to them, a necessary presence, but not a person with dreams and struggles of her own. My story. She smiled. Pretty simple. I take care of people. By choice or necessity? The directness of his question caught her off guard again. Both, I suppose. Before he could respond, his monitors began to alarm. His blood pressure was dropping. Callie moved quickly, calling for assistance and administering medication. For the next 20 minutes, she worked alongside Dr. Patel to stabilize him. When the crisis passed, Elliot lay back, exhausted but stable. Callie checked his lines one final time. Thank you, he murmured, his eyes already closing. Just doing my job, she replied softly. No, he said, his voice fading as sleep claimed him. It's more than that. Callie left his room with an odd feeling, as if something significant had just happened, though she couldn't say what. By the time dawn broke, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, Callie was exhausted. In the locker room, she changed out of her scrubs, her movements mechanical from years of routine. Her colleague Jennifer was just arriving, fresh-faced and carrying coffee. Rough night? Jennifer asked, noting Callie's exhaustion. The usual, Callie replied, forcing a smile. New admission in 418. Renal failure. Keep an eye on him. He crashed once already. Jennifer nodded. Will do. You heading home or to your other job? Home first. Mom has therapy at 10, then I'll grab a few hours sleep before my shift at the diner. Jennifer shook her head. I don't know how you do it, Cal. 2 jobs, taking care of your mom, helping your brother. When do you ever rest? Callie shrugged, slinging her bag over her shoulder. I'll rest when the bills stop coming. Outside, the morning air was crisp, a welcome change from the antiseptic smell of the hospital. Callie waited at the bus stop, too tired to notice the beauty of the sunrise. Her mind was already calculating. Rent due tomorrow, mother's medication running low, Wyatt's tuition payment coming up. The mental math never added. The bus arrived with a hiss of brakes. Callie boarded, finding a seat near the back. As the city passed by in a blur of concrete and glass, she thought about Elliot Mercer. There was something about him, something in his eyes when he thanked her. As if he saw her, really saw her, when most people looked right through. The apartment building where Callie lived with her mother and brother was a gray structure with peeling paint and temperamental elevators. Today, naturally, the elevator was out of service. Callie climbed the 4 flights of stairs, each step heavier than the last. Their apartment was small but tidy. Callie's mother, Margaret, insisted on cleanliness even as her body betrayed her. The living room doubled as Margaret's bedroom since her Parkinson's had worsened, making stairs impossible. A hospital bed occupied one corner, next to a window that overlooked the city. Margaret was awake, her silver hair neatly combed, her thin hands folded on her lap. Once a vibrant kindergarten teacher, she now existed in a body that trembled and froze without warning. Morning, Mom. Callie kissed her mother's forehead. Did you sleep? On and off, Margaret smiled, her eyes bright despite her condition. Wyatt left for class. There's coffee. Callie headed to the tiny kitchen, pouring herself a cup. The counter was crowded with medication bottles, a small pharmacy of pills that kept her mother comfortable but not cured. Each bottle represented another bill, another hour she needed to work. How was your shift? Margaret called. Good. Callie returned to the living room, settling beside her mother's bed. Got a new patient right at the end. Kidney failure. Poor soul. Yeah. Callie hesitated, then added, There's something about him, Mom. Something different. Margaret raised an eyebrow. Different how? I don't know. Just, he sees people. Really sees them. Her mother's eyes twinkled. Handsome. Callie laughed, shaking her head. Mom, he's a patient. And he's very sick. Even sick people can be handsome. The conversation was interrupted by Callie's phone buzzing again. She glanced at it and sighed. Wyatt's college counselor. Again. You should answer it, Margaret said gently. Callie nodded, stepping into the hallway. The conversation was brief and familiar. Wyatt's tuition payment was late. Without it, he couldn't register for next semester's classes. They could give her 1 more week, but that was it. She returned to find her mother watching her with knowing eyes. Tuition. Yeah, we'll figure it out, Margaret said, her voice firm despite the tremor in her hands. We always do. Callie nodded, squeezing her mother's hand. I'm going to get some sleep before I have to take you to therapy, okay? You work too hard, Margaret murmured. I do what needs doing. Callie kissed her mother's cheek before heading to the small bedroom she shared with Wyatt, him at night, her during the day, a relay of sleep in the same bed. She kicked off her shoes and collapsed onto the mattress, too tired to change. Sleep came instantly, but it was filled with dreams of falling, of running, of never quite reaching safety. 3 hours later, her alarm jolted her awake. She showered quickly, the lukewarm water doing little to refresh her. By the time she helped her mother into the wheelchair and down the service elevator, the only one big enough for the chair, Callie was operating on autopilot. The physical therapy center was 10 blocks away, a journey they made 3 times a week. The therapist, Mark, greeted them with a warmth that suggested he was more friend than healthcare provider. "How's our star patient today?" he asked, helping Margaret onto the treatment table. "Ready to run a marathon," Margaret quipped. While her mother went through the exercises designed to maintain what mobility she had left, Callie sat in the waiting room, scrolling through job listings on her phone. Maybe she could pick up a 3rd job, just temporarily. Something she could do from home, during the few hours she wasn't at the hospital or the diner or taking care of her family. Nothing looked promising. Nothing ever did. Mark found her there 40 minutes later. "She did great today," he said, sitting beside Callie. "But I'm concerned about her pain levels. Has she seen the neurologist recently?" Callie shook her head. "Insurance won't cover another visit until next month." Mark hesitated, then lowered his voice. "I have a friend at County General. He might be able to see her sooner, off the books." Callie looked up, hope flaring briefly. "Really? Let me make a call." Mark squeezed her shoulder before returning to his patients. After therapy, Callie took her mother home, settled her with lunch and medication, then headed to her 2nd job at Mabel's diner. The walk was 25 minutes, a precious 15 minutes of solitude in her crowded life. Mabel's was busy when she arrived, the lunch rush in full swing. The owner, a gruff woman with a heart of gold, nodded as Callie tied on her apron. "Table 6 has been asking for you," Mabel said, jerking her head toward a booth by the window. Callie looked over, surprised to see Dr. Patel from the hospital. The doctor waved her over. "I thought you'd be sleeping," Dr. Patel said as Callie approached. "Bills don't pay themselves." Callie smiled, pulling out her order pad. "What can I get you?" "Coffee black." Dr. Patel studied her with professional assessment. "You look exhausted." "I'm fine. Your patient from last night, Mercer. He was asking about you." Callie paused, pen hovering over the pad. "Me? Why?" "Wanted to know when you'd be back on shift." Dr. Patel shrugged. "Said you were the first person in a long time who actually listened to him." Something warm unfurled in Callie's chest, a small, unexpected pleasure at being remembered, at making a difference, however small. "His numbers are worse today," Dr. Patel continued, her voice dropping. "We've moved him up on the transplant list, but with his blood type." She didn't need to finish. They both knew what that meant. Without a compatible donor, Elliot Mercer's chances were slim. "I'll bring your coffee," Callie said, turning away to hide the unexpected sting of tears in her eyes. The rest of her shift passed in a blur of orders and tips and aching feet. By the time she returned home, it was nearly 7. Wyatt was in the kitchen, attempting to cook dinner while simultaneously studying for an exam. At 19, Wyatt was tall and lanky, with their mother's silver blue eyes and their father's determined jaw. He looked up as Callie entered, his face breaking into a grin that transformed him from exhausted student to the bus arrived with a hiss of brakes. Callie boarded, finding a seat near the back. As the city passed by in a blur of concrete and glass, she thought about Elliot Mercer. There was something about him, something in his eyes when he thanked her. As if he saw her, really saw her, when most people looked right through. The apartment building where Callie lived with her mother and brother was a gray structure with peeling paint and temperamental elevators. Today, naturally, the elevator was out of service. Callie climbed the 4 flights of stairs, each step heavier than the last. Their apartment was small but tidy. Callie's mother, Margaret, insisted on cleanliness even as her body betrayed her. The living room doubled as Margaret's bedroom since her Parkinson's had worsened, making stairs impossible. A hospital bed occupied one corner, next to a window that overlooked the city. Margaret was awake, her silver hair neatly combed, her thin hands folded on her lap. Once a vibrant kindergarten teacher, she now existed in a body that trembled and froze without warning. "Morning, Mom," Callie kissed her mother's forehead. "Did you sleep?" "On and off," Margaret smiled, her eyes bright despite her condition. Wyatt left for class. "There's coffee." Callie headed to the tiny kitchen, pouring herself a cup. The counter was crowded with medication bottles, a small pharmacy of pills that kept her mother comfortable but not cured. Each bottle represented another bill, another hour she needed to work. "How was your shift?" Margaret called. "Good." Callie returned to the living room, settling beside her mother's bed. "Got a new patient right at the end. Kidney failure. Poor soul." "Yeah." Callie hesitated, then added, "There's something about him, Mom. Something different." Margaret raised an eyebrow. "Different how?" "I don't know. Just, he sees people. Really sees them." Her mother's eyes twinkled. "Handsome." Callie laughed, shaking her head. "Mom, he's a patient. And he's very sick. Even sick people can be handsome." The conversation was interrupted by Callie's phone buzzing again. She glanced at it and sighed. Wyatt's college counselor. "Again." "You should answer it," Margaret said gently. Callie nodded, stepping into the hallway. The conversation was brief and familiar. Wyatt's tuition payment was late. Without it, he couldn't register for next semester's classes. They could give her one more week, but that was it. She returned to find her mother watching her with knowing eyes. "Tuition?" "Yeah, we'll figure it out," Margaret said, her voice firm despite the tremor in her hands. "We always do." Callie nodded, squeezing her mother's hand. "I'm going to get some sleep before I have to take you to therapy, okay?" "You work too hard," Margaret murmured. "I do what needs doing." Callie kissed her mother's cheek before heading to the small bedroom she shared with Wyatt, him at night, her during the day, a relay of sleep in the same bed. She kicked off her shoes and collapsed onto the mattress, too tired to change. Sleep came instantly, but it was filled with dreams of falling, of running, of never quite reaching safety. 3 hours later, her alarm jolted her awake. She showered quickly, the lukewarm water doing little to refresh her. By the time she helped her mother into the wheelchair and down the service elevator, the only one big enough for the chair, Callie was operating on autopilot. The physical therapy center was 10 blocks away, a journey they made 3 times a week. The therapist, Mark, greeted them with a warmth that suggested he was more friend than healthcare provider. "How's our star patient today?" he asked, helping Margaret onto the treatment table. "Ready to run a marathon," Margaret quipped. While her mother went through the exercises designed to maintain what mobility she had left, Callie sat in the waiting room, scrolling through job listings on her phone. Maybe she could pick up a third job, just temporarily. Something she could do from home, during the few hours she wasn't at the hospital or the diner or taking care of her family. Nothing looked promising. Nothing ever did. Mark found her there 40 minutes later. "She did great today," he said, sitting beside Callie. "But I'm concerned about her pain levels. Has she seen the neurologist recently?" Callie shook her head. "Insurance won't cover another visit until next month." Mark hesitated, then lowered his voice. "I have a friend at County General. He might be able to see her sooner, off the books." Callie looked up, hope flaring briefly. "Really? Let me make a call." Mark squeezed her shoulder before returning to his patients. After therapy, Callie took her mother home, settled her with lunch and medication, then headed to her second job at Mabel's diner. The walk was 25 minutes, a precious 15 minutes of solitude in her crowded life. Mabel's was busy when she arrived, the lunch rush in full swing. The owner, a gruff woman with a heart of gold, nodded as Callie tied on her apron. "Table 6 has been asking for you," Mabel said, jerking her head toward a booth by the window. Callie looked over, surprised to see Dr. Patel from the hospital. The doctor waved her over. "I thought you'd be sleeping," Dr. Patel said as Callie approached. "Bills don't pay themselves." Callie smiled, pulling out her order pad. "What can I get you?" "Coffee black." Dr. Patel studied her with professional assessment. "You look exhausted." "I'm fine. Your patient from last night, Mercer. He was asking about you." Callie paused, pen hovering over the pad. "Me? Why?" "Wanted to know when you'd be back on shift." Dr. Patel shrugged. "Said you were the first person in a long time who actually listened to him." Something warm unfurled in Callie's chest, a small, unexpected pleasure at being remembered, at making a difference, however small. "His numbers are worse today," Dr. Patel continued, her voice dropping. "We've moved him up on the transplant list, but with his blood type." She didn't need to finish. They both knew what that meant. Without a compatible donor, Elliot Mercer's chances were slim. "I'll bring your coffee," Callie said, turning away to hide the unexpected sting of tears in her eyes. The rest of her shift passed in a blur of orders and tips and aching feet. By the time she returned home, It was nearly 7. Wyatt was in the kitchen, attempting to cook dinner while simultaneously studying for an exam. At 19, Wyatt was tall and lanky, with their mother's silver blue eyes and their father's determined jaw. He looked up as Callie entered, his face breaking into a grin that transformed him from exhausted student to Have you ever wondered what it takes to be truly selfless in a world that rewards selfishness? What drives someone to give everything they have, their time, their energy, their very health, for the sake of others? In this extraordinary story, we'll see how one nurse's daily sacrifices create a foundation for an unexpected miracle that no one could have predicted. Do you know someone who works multiple jobs just to keep their family afloat? Have you witnessed the quiet heroism of healthcare workers who put everyone else before themselves? This story might remind you of someone in your own life, someone whose kindness deserves recognition. If this story resonates with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to our channel. We bring you these real-life tales of extraordinary, ordinary people every week, and your support helps us continue sharing these powerful stories of human connection. The morning sun filtered through threadbare curtains as Callie Braddock unlocked the door to her apartment. Her shoulders ached from the 14-hour shift, and the weight of her nursing bag seemed to have doubled during the bus ride home. The apartment was quiet, too quiet. Immediately, her exhaustion gave way to concern. "Mom," she called, dropping her bag by the door. A faint voice answered from the living room. "I'm here, honey." Callie hurried in to find her mother, Margaret, still in bed. At 58, Margaret Braddock looked a decade older, her once vibrant face now mapped with lines of pain, her silver-streaked hair fanned across the pillow. The Parkinson's diagnosis 5 years ago had transformed this former kindergarten teacher from a whirlwind of energy to a woman who sometimes couldn't hold a spoon. "Why aren't you up? Did you take your morning meds?" Callie checked her watch. 7:42 a.m. Margaret's hands trembled as she reached for her daughter. "The tremors were bad this morning. I didn't want to risk falling." Callie's heart clenched. She should have been here. She shouldn't have taken that extra shift. But the electricity bill had come yesterday, stamped with a final notice, and what choice did she have? "Let me help you," she said, gently pulling back the covers. "Therapy's at 10, and we need to get you dressed and fed." As Callie helped her mother through the morning routine, teeth brushed, face washed, hair combed, medication taken with a small breakfast, she moved with the efficiency of someone who had done this hundreds of times. Because she had. A door slammed, and footsteps thundered down the hallway. Wyatt appeared in the doorway, his hair disheveled, shirt half-tucked, the very picture of a rushed college student. "Morning, ladies," he grinned, bending to kiss his mother's cheek. "Cal, there's coffee. You're a lifesaver." Callie squeezed his arm gratefully. At 19, Wyatt had their father's height and their mother's kind eyes. He was studying business at the community college while working part-time at a hardware store. The arrangement was supposed to be temporary, just until they got back on their feet after their father's death 3 years ago. But temporary had stretched into permanent, and Callie knew Wyatt was considering dropping out to work full-time. "I made Mom breakfast already," Wyatt said, checking his watch. "I've got class until 2, then work until close. You need anything before I go?" Callie shook her head. "Just focus on your studies. And don't be late for class again." "Yes, boss." He saluted with mock seriousness before grabbing his backpack. "Love you both." And he was gone, a whirlwind of youth and energy that left the apartment feeling emptier in his wake. Callie poured herself coffee from the pot Wyatt had made, adding a splash of the milk that was dangerously close to its expiration date. She sank into a kitchen chair, allowing herself exactly 3 minutes of rest before the next task. The apartment told the story of their lives, small, clean, and showing signs of better days. The furniture was mismatched but functional. The walls needed paint. The kitchen appliances were outdated but meticulously maintained. On the refrigerator, held by magnetic clips, were Wyatt's report cards, all A's and B's despite everything, Margaret's medication schedule, and a calendar marked with color-coded entries for doctor's appointments, work shifts, bill due dates, and Wyatt's exams. Next to the calendar hung a faded photograph, the 3 of them plus David, Callie's father, at the beach 5 years ago. Before the Parkinson's. Before the heart attack that took David. Before life became a constant struggle to stay afloat. Callie's 3 minutes ended. She drained her coffee, rinsed the cup, and returned to her mother. "Ready for therapy?" she asked, her voice infused with a cheerfulness she didn't feel. "As ready as I'll ever be," Margaret replied, her smile brave despite the pain evident in her eyes. Getting her mother to therapy was an operation that required military precision. The wheelchair had to be navigated through their narrow doorway, down the hall, and into the building's service elevator. Then came the challenge of the sidewalk, cracked and uneven, and the bus with its impatient driver and passengers who sighed audibly at the delay of loading a wheelchair. By the time they reached the physical therapy center, Callie's arms ached from maneuvering the chair, and a headache was forming behind her eyes. But she smiled at Mark, the therapist, and helped transfer her mother onto the treatment table. "You look exhausted," Mark said bluntly, eyeing Callie as he began working on Margaret's rigid limbs. "When was the last time you had a day off?" Callie shrugged. "I'm fine. That's not what I asked." "I don't remember," she admitted. "A few weeks, maybe." Mark frowned. "You can't help anyone if you collapse, Callie." She knew he was right, but what choice did she have? The insurance covered only a fraction of her mother's care. Wyatt's tuition payments were perpetually behind. The rent increased every year. And the diner where she worked part-time had cut back everyone's hours. While her mother went through therapy, Callie sat in the waiting room, using the time to pay bills online and check her schedule for the coming week. Hospital shifts Monday, Wednesday, Thursday nights. Diner shifts Tuesday, Friday, Saturday days. Sunday she'd promised to cover for a colleague. That left, well, no days off, but at least she wasn't working a double on Wednesday. Her phone buzzed with a text from the diner manager. "Need you to come in early today." Jen called out sick. Callie closed her eyes briefly, calculating. If she took her mother straight home after therapy, she could catch a quick shower, maybe even a 30-minute nap before heading to the diner for what would now be a 9-hour shift instead of 6. "Okay," she texted back. "Be there by 12. An hour later, she wheeled her mother out of the therapy center. Mark followed them to the door. "I spoke to that neurologist friend I mentioned," he said quietly. "He can see Margaret next Tuesday at 4 p.m. Off the books." Callie's heart leapt. "Really? Thank you, Mark." He waved away her thanks. "Just taking care of my favorite patient." And her daughter. At home, Callie helped her mother settle on the couch with a book and a cup of tea. "I need to go in early today," she explained, setting Margaret's phone, water, and medication within easy reach. "Wyatt will be home by 6. Will you be okay until then?" Margaret's eyes were understanding but sad. "I'll be fine. But Callie, honey, when are you going to rest?" "I'll rest tonight," Callie promised, knowing it was a lie. Tonight she would wash uniforms, prepare meals for tomorrow, and try to fix the leaking faucet in the bathroom. After a quick shower that did little to revive her, Callie changed into her diner uniform, a pale blue dress with a white apron that reminded her of 1950s TV shows. She braided her damp hair and applied just enough makeup to hide the shadows under her eyes. Mabel's diner was 15 blocks away, normally a pleasant walk, but today each step felt like an effort. The diner was busy when she arrived, the lunch rush already underway. "Thank God," Mabel herself greeted Callie at the door. A formidable woman in her 60s, Mabel ran her establishment with an iron fist, but a heart of gold. "Jen's got the flu, half the county's decided to eat lunch here, and I'm sure to cook. You're on tables 1 through 8. Callie nodded, tying on her apron and diving into the chaos. For the next 5 hours, she barely stopped moving, taking orders, carrying plates, refilling coffee, adding up checks. Her smile never faltered, her steps never slowed, even as exhaustion built in her bones. The customers were mostly regulars, construction workers from the site down the block, office employees from the nearby insurance company, retirees who came for the daily special and stayed for hours, nursing a single cup of coffee. They knew Callie, respected her work ethic, tipped what they could. At 3 o'clock, during a brief lull, Callie collapsed onto a stool at the counter. Mabel slid a plate of fries in front of her. "Eat," the older woman commanded. "You're running on fumes." Callie didn't argue. She hadn't eaten since the toast she'd shared with her mother that morning. "How's your mama?" Mabel asked, wiping down the counter. "The same," Callie replied between bites. "Maybe a little worse with the tremors. But Mark found a neurologist who'll see her next week." Mabel nodded approvingly. "That boy's sweet on you, you know." Callie nearly choked on a fry. "Mark." "No, he's just nice." "Nice to you," Mabel emphasized. "Different things." Before Callie could respond, the bell over the door jangled, announcing new customers. She slid off the stool, straightening her apron. "Thanks for the fries. Take home a plate for your brother," Mabel called after her. Boy's too skinny. By the time her shift ended at 8, Callie was moving through a fog of fatigue. Mabel pressed a container into her hands, meatloaf and mashed potatoes for Wyatt, and sent her home with a stern instruction to sleep. The apartment was quiet when she returned. Wyatt sat at the kitchen table, textbooks spread around him, his face tight with concentration. He looked up as she entered, relief washing over his features. Thank God. I was about to call you. Callie frowned. What's wrong? Mom had a bad spell earlier. The tremors got really bad, and she couldn't take her evening meds. I had to help her, but... He hesitated. I think she needs to see a doctor, Cal. Callie set down her bag, fatigue forgotten. When? What happened exactly? Wyatt explained, the sudden worsening of the tremors, the difficulty swallowing, the moment of confusion when Margaret hadn't recognized him. Callie listened, her heart pounding with a familiar fear. Mark found a neurologist who can see her Tuesday, she said, moving to check on her mother, who was now sleeping peacefully. We'll hold out until then. Wyatt followed her. And how are we going to pay for that? I'll figure it out. The words were automatic, a mantra she'd repeated so often it had lost meaning. You always say that. Wyatt's voice was tight. But you can't fix everything, Cal. You're killing yourself trying. She turned to face him, suddenly angry. What would you have me do? Give up? Let Mom suffer? Let you drop out? Tell me, Wyatt, what's the alternative? He stepped back, hurt flashing across his face. I didn't mean. I know. The anger drained away as quickly as it had come, leaving only exhaustion in its wake. I'm sorry. I'm just tired. Wyatt hugged her then, this boy who had somehow become a man when she wasn't looking. We'll figure it out together, he said, echoing her words back to her. Eat something. I'll make tea. Later, after checking on her mother one last time and making sure Wyatt was settled with his studies, Callie finally allowed herself to collapse onto her bed. She should shower again. She should prepare her uniform for tomorrow night's hospital shift. She should review her bills and see what could be delayed another week. Instead, she closed her eyes, just for a moment. She woke with a start at 2 a.m., still fully dressed, her mind immediately racing with all the tasks she'd neglected. But underneath the anxiety was a strange anticipation. Tonight she would see Elliot Mercer again. The thought brought an unexpected warmth. The hospital was quiet when Callie arrived for her shift. She changed into fresh scrubs and checked the assignment board. Room 418, Elliot Mercer, was still hers. His room was dark when she entered, but he wasn't asleep. He sat propped up in bed, staring out the window at the city lights. Couldn't sleep. Callie asked softly, checking his 4. He turned to her, and she was struck again by the intensity of his gaze. Not much point in sleeping when you've got so little time left to be awake. The bluntness of his statement caught her off guard. You don't know that. The transplant list. Let's not pretend, Callie. His voice was gentle but firm. My blood type is rare. My condition is deteriorating. The math isn't in my favor. She should have offered reassurance, the kind of professional optimism nurses were expected to maintain. Instead, she found herself responding with honesty. No, it's not. But stranger things have happened. A small smile touched his lips. Yes, they have. He studied her face. You look tired. Long day, she admitted, recording his vitals in the chart. Tell me about it. Again, the unexpected interest. Patients rarely asked about her life, and when they did, she usually deflected with generic pleasantries. But something about Elliot made her want to be honest. 2 jobs, a mother with Parkinson's, a brother in college, and an apartment that's falling apart. The usual. He nodded, as if her litany of responsibilities was exactly what he'd expected. And when do you rest? She smiled wryly. That's what everyone keeps asking me. Because we can all see what you refuse to acknowledge. Which is that you're running yourself into the ground. His words were blunt, but his tone was kind. That you've taken on the weight of the world and convinced yourself you're the only one who can carry it. Callie blinked, surprised by the accuracy of his assessment. I do what needs doing. At what cost? The question hung between them, unanswerable. Callie busied herself checking his monitors, adjusting his blankets. Nurse tasks that gave her hands something to do while her mind scrambled for a response. Why did you become a nurse? She hesitated. My dad got sick when I was in high school. Cancer. The nurses who took care of him, they made an unbearable situation bearable. I wanted to do that for other families. And you do, Elliot said softly. I've watched you with the other patients. You make a difference." The simple acknowledgement brought unexpected tears to her eyes. She blinked them away quickly, embarrassed. "Just doing my job." "No," he said, his voice firm. "It's more than that. It's a calling. There's a difference." She met his gaze, struck by the certainty in his eyes. "How would you know?" "Because I've spent my life watching people work. Some do it for money, some for status, some because they don't know what else to do. But a very few, do it because they can't imagine doing anything else. That's you." His assessment was so accurate it almost hurt. Callie had never considered doing anything but nursing. Even when the hours were brutal, the pay inadequate, the emotional toll overwhelming. "What about you?" she asked. "What did you do before?" She gestured vaguely at the hospital bed, the monitors. A shadow crossed his face. "I built things." "What kind of things?" "Companies, mostly." He looked away. "I was good at it. Too good, maybe." There was something in his tone that suggested a story, perhaps a regret, but Callie didn't press. Everyone had their private sorrows. "Do you miss it?" she asked instead. "Parts of it," he admitted. "The challenge. The problem-solving. Not the rest. The rest. The politics. The compromises. The constant pressure to grow, expand, consume." He turned back to her. "Lying here, facing the end, I find myself wondering if any of it mattered." "It mattered to the people whose jobs you created," Callie offered. "To their families." He smiled faintly. "Perhaps. But what about you, Callie? What matters to you, beyond your family?" The question caught her off guard. No one had asked her that in years. She'd been so focused on survival, on the next shift, the next bill, the next crisis, that her own desires had shrunk to almost nothing. "I don't know anymore," she admitted. "There was a time when I wanted more. Travel. Education. Maybe even a family of my own. But now, I just want everyone I love to be okay." "That's a worthy goal," Elliot said quietly, "but an incomplete one." Before she could ask what he meant, his monitors began to beep in warning. His blood pressure was dropping again, not dangerously, but enough to need attention. Callie shifted immediately from conversation to professional mode, adjusting his medication, checking his output, recording the changes. By the time she'd stabilized him, their moment of connection had passed. Elliot was tired, his eyes heavy with the effort of fighting his failing body. "Rest," she told him gently. "I'll be back to check on you in an hour." He caught her hand as she turned to go. "Thank you, Callie. For doing my job. For seeing me," he said simply. "Not just my illness. Me." The words stayed with her as she continued her rounds, checking on her other patients, documenting treatments, passing medications. Elliot Mercer was unlike anyone she'd met before, perceptive, direct, unafraid to ask the questions most people avoided. When she returned to his room an hour later, he was asleep, his face relaxed, almost peaceful. Callie checked his vitals quietly, careful not to wake him. As she turned to leave, her gaze fell on the book beside his bed, a collection of poetry by Mary Oliver. She smiled, adding this detail to the puzzle of Elliot Mercer. The rest of her shift passed without incident. As dawn approached, Callie found herself in the break room, staring into a cup of lukewarm coffee. Her colleague Rodriguez dropped into the chair across from her. "How's Rich Guy?" he asked. Callie frowned. "Who?" "Your patient in 418. Word is he's loaded. Like private jet, summer home in the Hamptons loaded." She shook her head, skeptical. "He's wearing a hospital gown just like everyone else." Rodriguez shrugged. "That's the rumor. One of the techs recognized him, said he's some big-shot investor. Built half the tech companies in the valley." Callie thought about Elliot's words. "I built things. Companies, mostly. Could it be true? And if so, why was he alone, without family or friends to support him through this crisis?" Her curiosity grew throughout the day as she moved through her usual routine. Home, check on mom, sleep a few hours, help Wyatt with a paper, back to the hospital. By the time she returned for her next shift, she was watching Elliot with new eyes, looking for signs that he might indeed be the wealthy businessman Rodriguez had described. She found none. His hospital room contained no personal items beyond the book of poetry and the expensive watch. He never used his phone to make business calls. No assistants or colleagues came to visit. He was just a man, alone and ill, facing his mortality with a quiet dignity that moved her. That night, as she checked his medication, she found the courage to ask, "Have you thought about contacting anyone? Friends? Colleagues? No one should go through this alone." Elliot studied her for a long moment. I've lived a solitary life by choice, Callie. I built walls, not bridges. He paused, his expression thoughtful. Although I'm beginning to wonder if that was a mistake. It's never too late, she offered. For some things it is. His voice was matter-of-fact, without self-pity. But I appreciate your concern. As the days passed, Callie found herself drawn more deeply into Elliot's orbit. Their conversations ranged widely, from books they'd read to places they'd traveled, from philosophy to music, from regrets to aspirations. He never spoke directly about his work or wealth, but occasionally dropped hints that suggested Rodriguez's rumors might have merit. "Tell me about your mother," he said one night, as Callie was changing his four. She told him about Margaret, the vibrant kindergarten teacher who'd filled their home with books and art and music, whose laughter had once been the soundtrack of Callie's childhood, whose disease had stolen so much but not her spirit. "And your brother?" Elliot prompted. "Why, it's brilliant," Callie said, unable to keep the pride from her voice. "He could do anything, be anything, if just given the chance." But life isn't fair," she said simply. "And opportunities cost money we don't have." Elliot was quiet for a moment. "What would you do, Callie, if money were no object? If all those burdens were lifted?" She laughed softly. "That's a fantasy I can't afford. Humor me." She considered the question, allowing herself to imagine a life without constant financial stress. "I'd make sure Mom had the best care. I'd help Wyatt finish college without debt. I'd probably still work as a nurse, but maybe not these crazy hours." "And for yourself?" Elliot pressed. "Just for you." The question stumped her. She'd spent so long putting everyone else first that her own desires had become foreign territory. "I don't know," she admitted finally. "Maybe travel, see more of the world than just this city. Maybe go back to school myself. There's a nurse practitioner program I've always been interested in." Elliot nodded, as if her answer confirmed something for him. Dreams deferred but not forgotten. "That's good." The conversation shifted to other topics, but later, Callie found herself returning to Elliot's question. What would she do if money were no object? The possibilities were both exhilarating and terrifying, a world of choices she'd never allowed herself to consider. As Elliot's condition continued to deteriorate, Callie found herself spending more time in his room, not just as his nurse but as his friend. She brought him fresh books from the hospital library, shared stories about her other patients, anonymized of course, and once even smuggled in a decent cup of coffee from the cafe across the street. One night, as her shift was ending, Elliot asked, "Will you sit with me for a moment, Callie? Just a minute or two." She should have been heading home. Wyatt had an early class, and she needed to help her mother with breakfast. But the request was so simple, so human, that she couldn't refuse. Of course. She sat in the chair beside his bed. For a long moment, he was quiet, staring out at the night sky. Then softly, "I've been thinking about kindness. About the people who give without expectation of return. About you." "I'm just doing my job," she said automatically. "No." His voice was firm. "You're doing far more than your job requires. You're giving pieces of yourself to everyone who needs you. Your mother, your brother, your patients. Me." Callie didn't know how to respond. Elliot reached out, taking her hand in his. His skin was cool and paper-thin, the bones prominent. "Promise me something," he said. "What?" "That you'll remember to keep a piece for yourself. That you won't give everything away until there's nothing left." The intensity in his eyes made her throat tight. "I promise to try." He nodded, releasing her hand. "That's all any of us can do." As she left the hospital that morning, Callie found herself turning his words over in her mind. Keep a piece for yourself. It was such a simple concept, yet one she'd forgotten years ago. The morning air was cool against her face as she walked to the bus stop. For the first time in ages, she noticed the beauty of the sunrise, the way the light caught the windows of the buildings, turning them to gold. She took a deep breath, allowing herself a moment of peace before returning to her hectic life. In that moment, she had no way of knowing that soon, everything would change. That the man in room 418, the quiet, mysterious Elliot Mercer, would alter the course of her life in ways she couldn't begin to imagine. That her acts of ordinary kindness would be repaid in extraordinary ways. But for now, she was simply Callie Braddock, nurse, daughter, sister, caregiver, heading home after another long night of doing what she'd always done, giving everything she had to those who needed it. Have you ever met someone whose kindness seemed to have no limits? Someone who gives and gives without thought of reward? This story reminds us that such people exist all around us, often unrecognized, frequently undervalued, but absolutely essential to the fabric of our world. If this story touches your heart, please take a moment to subscribe to our channel and share it with others. Your support helps us continue bringing these powerful true stories to light, stories that remind us of the extraordinary impact of ordinary kindness. What would you do if someone's life hung in the balance and you held the power to save them? Would you risk your own health, your family's stability, and your career for a person you barely knew? This story shows how one extraordinary nurse faced this impossible choice, and how her selfless decision led to a miracle nobody saw coming. Have you ever wondered what drives people to become living organ donors? Can you imagine the courage it takes to offer a piece of yourself to save another? For most of us, this level of sacrifice remains theoretical, something we admire from afar but never expect to face ourselves. If stories of everyday heroes inspire you, please subscribe to our channel and hit the notification bell. Your support helps us continue sharing these remarkable true stories of courage, compassion, and unexpected rewards. Let us know in the comments if you've ever witnessed an act of extraordinary kindness that changed someone's life. The hospital corridor seemed longer than usual as Callie hurried toward the critical care unit. 2 weeks had passed since Elliot Mercer had been admitted to St. Agnes, and in that time, his condition had deteriorated rapidly. This morning, she'd received a text from Rodriguez. They moved Mercer to CCU. Not good. Her heart raced as she approached the unit's heavy double doors. As a nurse, she understood exactly what this move meant. Elliot's kidneys were failing completely. Without immediate intervention, his prognosis was measured in days, not weeks. She found him in room 4, surrounded by more machines than before, the steady beep of monitors punctuating the air. His face had grown gaunter, the hollows beneath his cheekbones more pronounced. His skin had taken on a yellowish tinge, a telltale sign of advanced renal failure. Elliot was awake, his eyes finding hers immediately. "Callie," he said, his voice weaker than she remembered. "You found me." She moved to his bedside, automatically checking the monitors, assessing his condition with a professional eye even as her heart tightened with concern. "Of course I found you. Did you think I'd let you hide from me in critical care?" A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "Never crossed my mind." Dr. Patel entered, clipboard in hand, her expression grave. "Nurse Braddock, I didn't realize you were on duty today." "I'm not," Callie admitted. "I heard about the transfer and wanted to check in." Dr. Patel nodded, her eyes softening with understanding. "Mr. Mercer, do you mind if I speak freely in front of Nurse Braddock?" Elliot shook his head. "She deserves to know." The doctor sighed, glancing at the chart. "The latest labs aren't good. Your kidneys are functioning at less than 10% capacity now. We've moved you up on the transplant list to highest priority, but with your blood type." She didn't need to finish. They all knew what it meant. Type B negative was rare, found in less than 2% of the population. The chance of a compatible donor becoming available in time was vanishingly small. "How long?" Elliot asked, his voice steady. "Without a transplant? A week. Maybe 2. Dr. Patel's honesty was gentle but unflinching. "We'll continue dialysis, manage your symptoms, keep you comfortable." Elliot nodded, accepting the news with a composed dignity that struck Callie like a physical blow. "Thank you, doctor." After Dr. Patel left, silence filled the room. Callie adjusted Elliot's blanket, straightened his pillow, small, meaningless gestures that gave her hands something to do while her mind raced. "Don't look so devastated," Elliot finally said. "We all knew this was coming." "That doesn't make it easier," she replied. "No, it doesn't." He studied her face. "But I've made my peace with it, Callie. I've lived my life. Made my choices, good and bad. I'm not afraid to die." "Well, I'm not ready for you to die," she said, surprising herself with the fierceness in her voice. His eyes widened slightly, then softened. "You hardly know me. I know enough." The truth was, in the 2 weeks she'd known Elliot Mercer, Callie had come to care about him in a way that transcended the typical nurse-patient relationship. Their late-night conversations had revealed a man of uncommon intelligence, quiet generosity, and surprising vulnerability. She'd shared things with him she rarely discussed with anyone, her fears for her mother's health, her worries about Wyatt's future, her own deferred dreams. And he had listened. Really listened, in a way few people ever had. "Go home, Callie," he said gently. "Get some rest. You look exhausted." "I will. Soon." She hesitated. "Is there anything I can get you? Anyone I can call?" He shook his head. Just your company, if you can spare it. She stayed for another hour, sitting beside his bed, talking about ordinary things. The unusually warm weather, a funny story about one of her diner customers, a book she'd been wanting to read but hadn't found time for. Neither mentioned the diagnosis hanging over them, the ticking clock they both heard. When she finally left, promising to return during her next shift, Callie felt hollow, as if something essential had been carved from her chest. She wandered to the hospital chapel, not because she was particularly religious, but because she needed a quiet place to think. The chapel was empty, the late afternoon sun streaming through stained glass windows, casting colorful patterns across the wooden pews. Callie sat in the last row, her mind churning with thoughts too chaotic to articulate. She wasn't sure how long she'd been sitting there when Nurse Chun found her. Chun was the transplant coordinator for St. Agnes, a veteran nurse with 20 years of experience guiding patients through the complex process of organ donation and transplantation. "Thought I might find you here," Chun said, sliding into the pew beside Callie. "Rodriguez told me about your patient." "Mercer." Callie nodded, not trusting herself to speak. "It's always harder when we get attached," Chun continued, her voice gentle with understanding. "Especially when they're alone. No family, no support system. He doesn't deserve to die like this," Callie said, her voice barely audible. "Not alone. Not now." Chun was quiet for a moment. "You know, there are options beyond the transplant list." Callie looked up. "What do you mean?" "Living donors. It's not commonly done outside of family, but it happens. Altruistic donors who want to help someone in need." The words hung in the air between them. Callie felt something shift in her mind, like a door opening to a possibility she hadn't considered. "Do you mean?" Chun nodded. "It's a major surgery. Recovery takes weeks. It's not something to consider lightly. But for the right person, with the right motivation." She let the sentence trail off. "Is it even allowed? Ethically? For a nurse to donate to a patient?" "There's no policy against it. It would require review by the ethics committee, psychological evaluation, extensive testing." Chun placed a hand on Callie's arm. "I'm not suggesting anything, Callie. Just letting you know all the options." With that, she stood and left, leaving Callie alone with a thought that was rapidly crystallizing from abstract possibility to concrete intention. Could she do it? Could she donate a kidney to Elliot? The medical risks were significant but manageable. The recovery would be difficult, 6 weeks minimum before she could return to normal activities, longer before she could resume the physical demands of nursing. Weeks without income, when her family already lived paycheck to paycheck. And yet, the image of Elliot in that hospital bed, alone and fading, burned in her mind. The unfairness of it, that someone so thoughtful, so present, so full of wisdom and kindness, should die for want of an organ she possessed in duplicate. Callie left the chapel with her decision half-formed, a seed taking root in fertile soil. That night, she couldn't sleep. She lay awake, staring at the ceiling, her mind racing through scenarios, weighing outcomes, calculating risks. By dawn, the seed had grown into certainty. She would be tested. If she was a match, she would donate her kidney to Elliot Mercer. The next morning, Callie approached Chun in the hospital cafeteria. "I want to be tested," she said without preamble, "as a potential donor for Elliot Mercer." Chen's expression remained neutral, professional. "Are you sure about this, Callie? It's a major decision, one that will affect your health, your career, your family. I understand that. And you're prepared for the possibility that you might not be a match?" Callie nodded. "I have to try." Chin studied her for a long moment, then nodded. "I'll schedule the initial blood work today. But Callie, this stays between us for now. No mention to the patient until we know if you're even compatible." The testing process began that afternoon. First came blood tests to determine compatibility, blood type, tissue type cross-matching. Callie tried not to hope too much, aware that the odds of a perfect match were slim, especially given Elliot's rare blood type. She continued her shifts at the hospital and the diner, checking on Elliot whenever possible, watching with a nurse's trained eye as his condition deteriorated despite the medical team's best efforts. She didn't mention the testing, respecting Chen's instruction to keep silent until they knew more. 3 days later, Chen caught her in the hallway outside the critical care unit. "We need to talk," she said, her expression unreadable. "In private." They retreated to an empty consultation room. Chen closed the door before turning to face Callie. "The preliminary results came back," she said. "Your blood type B negative." Callie's heart leapt. "The same as Elliot." Chun nodded. It's rare. Less than 2% of the population. Your tissue typing also shows potential compatibility, though we'd need more tests to confirm. So I could be a donor for him? Potentially, yes. But Callie, this is where it gets complicated. If you're serious about proceeding, we need to involve the ethics committee. And you need to talk to your family. The reality of what she was considering suddenly felt more concrete. Callie took a deep breath, steadying herself. I understand. When can we do the additional testing? I've already scheduled it. Tomorrow morning, 8 a.m. Chen's expression softened. Are you sure about this, Callie? Really sure. I've never been more certain of anything, Callie replied, and was surprised to discover it was true. That evening, she sat her mother and brother down in their small living room. Margaret was having a good day, her tremors minimal, her mind clear. Wyatt had just returned from a late class, his backpack still slung over his shoulder. I need to tell you both something, Callie began, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. And I need you to listen before you react. She told them about Elliot, not just his medical condition, but the man himself. The conversations they'd shared, the way he listened, the dignity with which he faced his prognosis. She explained the testing, the preliminary match, the possibility that she could save his life. When she finished, the room was silent. Margaret's eyes shone with tears, while Wyatt's face had hardened into an expression Callie couldn't read. You barely know this man, Wyatt finally said, his voice tight. And you're willing to risk your life for him? It's not risking my life, Callie countered. The mortality rate for kidney donors is. I don't care about statistics, Wyatt interrupted. I care about you. About what happens to us if something goes wrong. Have you thought about that? About Mom? About me? About how we'd manage if you were seriously ill or… He couldn't finish the sentence. Of course I've thought about it, Callie said softly. I've thought about nothing else. But I've also thought about what it means to let someone die when I could help them. Margaret reached out, taking Callie's hand in her trembling one. This is who you've always been, my love. Even as a little girl. Always giving, always helping. Her eyes filled with tears. I'm scared for you. But I'm also proud beyond words. Wyatt stood abruptly. This is crazy. You're talking about major surgery. Weeks without work. Who's going to take care of Mom? Pay the bills? Keep us from being evicted. We'll figure it out, Callie said, the familiar phrase sounding hollow even to her own ears. No. Wyatt's voice rose. That's not good enough anymore. You can't just say we'll figure it out and expect everything to work out. This isn't like picking up an extra shift or skipping a meal. This is your health. Your life. He grabbed his jacket and headed for the door. I need some air. After the door slammed behind him, Callie sat in silence, her mother's hand still clasped in hers. He's scared, Margaret said gently. We both are. But he'll come around. And you? Callie asked, searching her mother's face. Do you think I'm making a mistake? Margaret was quiet for a moment, considering. I think you're making a sacrifice. A beautiful, terrifying sacrifice. And I think whatever you decide, I will support you with every fiber of my being. Callie leaned forward, resting her head on her mother's knee as she had done as a child. Margaret stroked her hair, the tremors in her hand creating a gentle, irregular rhythm. Just promise me one thing, her mother said. What? Promise you're doing this for the right reasons. Not out of duty or obligation, but because your heart is telling you it's right. Callie closed her eyes. I promise. The next morning, she underwent additional testing, more detailed tissue typing, antibody screens, a complete physical examination. The process would normally take weeks, but given Elliot's critical condition, Chun had expedited everything. At the hospital, rumors had begun to circulate. Rodriguez cornered her in the break room. Is it true? You're getting tested to donate to rich guy. His name is Elliot, Callie corrected. And yes, I'm being tested. But it's not public knowledge yet, so keep it quiet. Rodriguez shook his head. You're something else, Braddock. Her supervisor, Nurse Jackson, called her into his office later that day. A formidable presence with 20 years of critical care experience, Jackson was known for his no-nonsense approach and fierce. Sit down, he said, gesturing to the chair across from his desk. I've heard concerning reports about your involvement with the patient in CCU4. Mercer. Callie met his gaze steadily. I'm being tested as a potential kidney donor for Mr. Mercer. All proper protocols are being followed. Jackson leaned back, his expression complicated. This is highly unusual, Callie. A nurse donating to a patient crosses professional boundaries. With all due respect, sir, there's no policy prohibiting it. No written policy, perhaps. But there are ethical considerations, personal and professional boundaries that exist for good reason. Callie nodded. I understand your concerns. But this is my decision. My body. My choice. Jackson studied her for a long moment. You understand that if you proceed, you'll need to be removed from his care immediately, and that if complications arise, your job could be affected. I understand. And you still want to do this? Yes. He sighed, a mix of exasperation and reluctant admiration crossing his features. The ethics committee meeting is tomorrow. They'll want to speak with you directly. He paused. For what it's worth, I think what you're doing is extraordinary. Foolish, perhaps, but extraordinary. Thank you, sir. As Callie left his office, she felt a strange mixture of terror and peace. The path she'd chosen was fraught with risks and uncertainties, but somehow, it also felt inevitable, as if her entire life had been leading to this decision. Wyatt didn't come home that night. He texted that he was staying with a friend, needed time to think. Callie lay awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering if she was making the biggest mistake of her life or its most meaningful choice. The ethics committee meeting the next morning was intense. 5 medical professionals, including Dr. Patel and Nurse Chun, asked probing questions about her motivations, her understanding of the risks, her relationship with Elliot. You've known this patient for less than 3 weeks, the head of the committee, Dr. Lawton, pointed out. What makes you willing to undergo major surgery for someone who is essentially a stranger? Callie considered the question carefully. If you're asking whether I have romantic feelings for Mr. Mercer, the answer is no. My connection with him is based on mutual respect and human compassion. But why him specifically? Pressed another committee member. Why not donate altruistically to someone on the waiting list? Because I know him, Callie said simply. I've watched him face death with courage and grace. I've seen his kindness to everyone around him, even when he's suffering. And yes, because he has no one else. The questioning continued for nearly an hour. Callie answered honestly, refusing to exaggerate or diminish her motivations. Finally, Dr. Lawton leaned back. We'll need to consult with Mr. Mercer's medical team and review the compatibility testing. A psychologist will also want to meet with you. We should have a decision by tomorrow. Callie nodded, exhausted but relieved that the hardest part was over. That afternoon, the hospital psychologist, Dr. Rao, met with her in a quiet consultation room. His questions were gentle but penetrating, exploring her mental state, her support system, her ability to cope with potential negative outcomes. What will you do if the surgery doesn't save him? He asked. If you make this sacrifice and Mr. Mercer still doesn't survive? The question hit her like a physical blow. She hadn't allowed herself to consider this possibility. I would grieve, she said finally. But I wouldn't regret trying. Dr. Rao nodded. And what about your own recovery? Have you made practical arrangements? Who will care for you? How will you manage financially? These were the questions Callie had been avoiding, the practical concerns that threatened to overwhelm her resolve. My brother will help with my mother's care, she said, hoping it was true. I have some savings. It's not much, but it will help for a while. Dr. Rao's expression remained neutral, but she sensed his skepticism. Kidney donation requires 6 to 8 weeks of recovery before returning to work. Do you have that kind of financial cushion? She didn't. They both knew it. I'll figure it out, she said, the familiar phrase now sounding thin even to her own ears. After the session, Callie found herself once again in the chapel, seeking solitude and clarity. The doubts she'd pushed aside now crowded in, demanding attention. Was she being reckless? Irresponsible? What would happen to her mother and Wyatt if her recovery was complicated? How would they pay rent, buy food, cover Margaret's medications? She was still sitting there when her phone buzzed with a text from Chun. Results are in. Full compatibility match. Committee approves. Please come to my office. Callie stared at the message, her heart pounding. It was real now. She could save Elliot's life. If she was brave enough. If she was strong enough. Chun was waiting when she arrived, a folder of documents on her desk. The match is excellent, she said without preamble. Better than we could have hoped for. And the ethics committee has given provisional approval, pending final consent from both you and Mr. Mercer. Callie nodded, suddenly unable to speak. We haven't informed Mr. Mercer yet, Chin continued. That's your choice, whether to identify yourself as the donor or remain anonymous. I want to tell him myself, Callie said. Chun nodded. I thought you might. But Callie, he has the right to refuse, even knowing it might be his only chance. The possibility hadn't occurred to her. Why would he refuse? For the same reasons your brother is concerned. He might not want you to take this risk for him. The thought was troubling. After coming this far, the idea that Elliot might reject her gift was almost unbearable. When can I speak with him? She asked. Whenever you're ready. But Callie. Chun hesitated. Be prepared for either response. And be honest about the risks, to both of you. Callie spent the walk to the critical care unit rehearsing what she would say, how she would present her decision not as a sacrifice, but as a choice freely made. But when she entered Elliot's room and saw him, paler than before, his breathing shallow, the machines around him working harder to compensate for his failing body, all her prepared words vanished. Callie, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. I was hoping you'd come today. She moved to his bedside, taking his hand in hers. It felt cooler than it should, the skin paper thin. I've missed you. Liar, he smiled faintly. You checked on me yesterday. A lot can happen in a day. She took a deep breath. Elliot, there's something I need to tell you. Have you ever faced a moment where your decision could literally save someone's life, or drastically alter your own? What would you sacrifice for a stranger who touched your heart? This story reminds us that sometimes the most extraordinary acts of kindness come from ordinary people who choose courage over comfort. If this story speaks to you, please take a moment to subscribe to our channel and share it with others who appreciate stories of everyday heroes. Your support helps us continue highlighting these remarkable true stories that restore our faith in humanity's capacity for compassion. What happens when a nurse risks everything to save a patient's life? How far would you go to help someone with no other options? This story takes us into the operating room where one woman's extraordinary sacrifice would forever change 2 lives and set in motion events that nobody could have predicted. Have you ever pushed through incredible pain for someone else's benefit? Do you know what it feels like to give a piece of yourself, literally, to save another person? While most of us will never face such a monumental choice, this remarkable story shows us the profound impact of putting someone else's needs above our own. If you find this story of sacrifice and unexpected reward moving, please hit that like button and subscribe to our channel. Your support helps us bring you more incredible true stories of ordinary heroes who receive extraordinary blessings for their selfless acts. Share your thoughts in the comments about what you would do in Callie's situation. Callie stood at Elliot's bedside, her heart pounding as she prepared to speak the words that would change both their lives forever. I've been tested, she said simply. I'm a match. I want to donate my kidney to you. The silence that followed seemed to stretch for eternity. Elliot stared at her, his eyes widening with shock, then narrowing in confusion, and finally filling with an emotion Callie couldn't quite name, something between wonder and dismay. No, he said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. Absolutely not. This wasn't the response she had anticipated. Elliot, Callie, do you understand what you're offering? This is major surgery. Weeks of recovery. Permanent changes to your body. Lifelong medical implications. I'm a nurse, she reminded him gently. I understand exactly what I'm offering. He shook his head, agitation bringing color to his pale cheeks. Your job. Your family. Your mother needs you. Your brother needs you. They're supporting my decision. A half-truth. Wyatt had returned home the night before, his anger cooled but not dismissed. He'd agreed to help with Margaret's care during Callie's recovery, but his eyes still held accusation. You're choosing a stranger over us. I can't let you do this, Elliot insisted. Callie sat on the edge of his bed, bringing her face level with his. Listen to me. I'm not asking your permission. I'm informing you of my decision. This is my kidney. My choice. Why? The question seemed torn from him. Why would you do this for me? How could she explain the certainty that had taken root in her heart? That sometimes, when a path appears before you with perfect clarity, you must follow it regardless of where it leads? Because you deserve a second chance, she said simply. And I can give it to you. Elliot studied her face, searching for uncertainty, hesitation, any crack in her resolve. Finding none, he closed his eyes briefly. I don't deserve this. It's not about deserving, Callie replied. It's about what's possible. We're compatible. A miracle in itself. And I want to do this. He was quiet for a long moment. When he opened his eyes again, they shone with unshed tears. I will spend the rest of my life, however long that may be, trying to be worthy of this gift. The surgery was scheduled for the following morning. The transplant team wanted to move quickly, given Elliot's deteriorating condition. Callie spent her final night of pre-surgery freedom at home, trying to prepare her family for what lay ahead. Margaret sat in her wheelchair at the kitchen table, carefully writing out a schedule of her medications and care needs for Wyatt to follow. Despite her trembling hands, she insisted on doing this herself, her contribution to the careful choreography their lives would become during Callie's recovery. "I've marked when each pill needs to be taken," she explained to Wyatt. "The blue ones can't be with food. The white ones must be with food. And these," she tapped a small orange bottle. "These are the most important for controlling the tremors." Wyatt nodded, his expression serious. At 19, he suddenly looked older, the weight of responsibility pressing years into his young face. "I'll remember." Callie watched them from the doorway, her heart full of love and worry. She'd taken a 6-week unpaid leave from the hospital, the maximum she could get without losing her position. The diner had been less accommodating. Mabel had held Callie's job for her, but without guarantee of hours upon her return. Their financial situation, always precarious, now teetered on the edge of disaster. The rent was paid for the current month, but beyond that, Callie pushed the thought away. One problem at a time. "I've put some casseroles in the freezer," she said, joining them at the table. "And Mrs. Abernathy next door said she'd bring dinners on Tuesdays and Thursdays." "We'll be fine," Margaret assured her, reaching out to squeeze her daughter's hand. "Don't worry about us. Focus on healing." "Mom's right," Wyatt added, surprising Callie with his support. "We've got this, and you'll be back on your feet before we know it." Callie smiled, blinking back tears. "When did you get so grown up?" "When my big sister decided to be a superhero," he replied, his attempt at humor not quite disguising the worry in his eyes. Later, alone in her room, Callie allowed herself to feel the fear she'd been suppressing. The surgery carried risks: infection, bleeding, complications from anesthesia. Recovery would be painful, exhausting, and longer than she'd admitted to her family. And the financial implications. She pulled out her laptop, reviewing their accounts one last time. Her savings would cover 2 months of rent, but little else. Margaret's medication costs were relentless. Wyatt's tuition payment loomed. The electricity bill was already past due. "We'll figure it out," she whispered to herself, the familiar mantra now a prayer more than a plan. "We always do." She closed the laptop and lay down, watching shadows play across the ceiling. In less than 12 hours, she would be under anesthesia, a surgeon's blade opening her body to extract the organ that would save Elliot Mercer's life. Was she crazy? Reckless? Selfish, even, to put her family through this uncertainty? No. The clear certainty that had guided her decision remained unshaken. This was right. This was necessary. This was somehow exactly what she was meant to do. Dawn arrived too quickly. Callie showered, carefully following the pre-surgical instructions she'd received. No food or drink after midnight. No makeup, jewelry, or contact lenses. A final scrub with antibacterial soap. Wyatt drove her to the hospital, the early morning streets nearly empty. Margaret had wanted to come, but had woken with severe tremors, a sign of stress, most likely. Callie had kissed her goodbye, promising to call as soon as she was awake and coherent. "You're sure about this?" Wyatt asked as they pulled into the hospital parking lot. "Last chance to change your mind." Callie smiled at her brother. "I'm sure, but what I can't put my head around is in whose car are we in. I hope you didn't cause any trouble, Wyatt." He nodded, putting the car in park. "Then let's do this." "And I know, I borrowed the car." The pre-op area was quiet, nurses moving efficiently between curtained bays. Callie changed into the hospital gown, strange to be wearing one rather than tending to someone in one. A nurse she didn't recognize started her for, checked her vitals, and asked the standard pre-surgical questions. Dr. Patel appeared, clipboard in hand. "All set?" she asked, her expression warm but professional. "As ready as I'll ever be," Callie replied. "Elliot is being prepped now. He asked me to give you something." The doctor handed Callie a folded piece of paper. "Read it when you're ready." After Dr. Patel left, Callie unfolded the note with trembling fingers. "Callie, words seem inadequate to express what your gift means to me. Know that whatever happens today, you have already saved me in ways you cannot imagine. Your courage, your compassion, your extraordinary heart have reminded me what it means to be truly human. With deepest gratitude, Elliot." Tears blurred her vision. She carefully refolded the note and tucked it under her pillow. Nurse Chen arrived next, wheeling a gurney. "Time to go," she said gently. Wyatt stood as they prepared to wheel Callie away. He leaned down, hugging her awkwardly around the 4 lines. "I love you," he whispered fiercely. "Come back to us." "Always," she promised. The journey to the operating room passed in a blur of ceiling tiles and fluorescent lights. In the hallway outside the OR, Callie caught a glimpse of another gurney being wheeled through a different set of doors. Elliot, she presumed, though she couldn't see his face. Inside the operating room, the anesthesiologist introduced himself, explaining what would happen next. Callie nodded, her nursing knowledge filling in the gaps in his patient-friendly explanation. The cold, sterile environment usually felt like a workplace to her. Now, as a patient, it seemed alien and intimidating. "We're going to take good care of you," the anesthesiologist assured her. "Just relax and count backward from 10 for me." 10, 9, 8. The room began to fade, the bright lights dimming. 7, 6. Her last conscious thought was of Elliot, and a prayer that they would both wake to new beginnings. Elliot Mercer drifted slowly back to consciousness, the familiar beeping of monitors gradually filtering through the fog of anesthesia. His mouth was dry, his body heavy, but the grinding pain that had been his constant companion for weeks was different. Still present, but transformed, sharper, more localized, somehow cleaner. He opened his eyes to find Dr. Patel checking his vitals. "Welcome back," she said, noticing he was awake. "The surgery was successful. Your new kidney is already functioning well." "Callie," his voice was a rasp. "She's in recovery." Everything went smoothly for her too. Relief flooded through him, more powerful than the pain medication dripping into his veins. "When can I see her?" "Not for a day or two. You both need to rest." Dr. Patel's expression turned serious. "Mr. Mercer, I want to be clear. This is the beginning of a long journey for both of you. Recovery will take weeks, and you'll need to be on anti-rejection medications for the rest of your life." "I understand." He did, more than most patients, having researched every aspect of kidney transplantation since his diagnosis. "But she's really okay?" "She's doing exactly as expected for someone who just underwent major surgery." The doctor's answer was carefully measured, neither overly reassuring nor concerning. "Now focus on your own recovery. That's the best way to honor her gift." Over the next 24 hours, Elliot drifted in and out of consciousness. When awake, he asked about Callie repeatedly, frustrated by the vague responses. "Recovering well. As expected. Needs rest." It wasn't until the second day post-surgery that Rodriguez, the night nurse Elliot recognized from his previous stay, offered more detailed information. "Braddock's tough," Rodriguez said as he checked Elliot's surgical site. "Already arguing with the doctors about getting out of bed. Typical nurse, worst patient ever." Elliot smiled weakly. "Sounds like her. Will you tell her something for me?" "Sure. Tell her." He hesitated, overwhelmed by everything he wanted to say. "Tell her I'm grateful, and that I'm keeping my promise to be worthy of her gift." Rodriguez nodded. "I'll tell her." On the third day, Elliot was strong enough to sit up, even stand briefly with assistance. His new kidney, Callie's kidney, was functioning well, his lab values improving hourly. The medical team was cautiously optimistic. It was Chen who finally brought news directly from Callie. "She asked me to give you this," the transplant coordinator said, handing Elliot a small card. Inside, in somewhat shaky handwriting, "Stop asking about me and focus on getting better. That's an order from your nurse. P.S. No refunds or exchanges on kidneys." Elliot laughed, then winced as the movement pulled at his incision. The card was so perfectly Callie, practical, determined, with that unexpected streak of humor, that he could almost hear her voice. "When can I see her?" he asked Chen. "She's being discharged tomorrow," Chen replied. "Against medical advice, in my opinion, but that's Callie for you. Stubborn to a fault." "Discharged? So soon?" Elliot frowned. "Isn't that dangerous?" Chen's expression tightened. "It's not ideal, but she's insistent. Says she can recover at home just as well, and that she can't afford to stay longer." The words hit Elliot like a physical blow. Of course. While he had comprehensive insurance and financial resources to cover any medical expense, Callie had none of these advantages. And she had given up weeks of income to donate her kidney to him. "Can I speak with Dr. Patel?" he asked, a plan forming in his mind. Pain was Callie's constant companion as she eased herself into the passenger seat of Wyatt's car. 5 days post-surgery, and every movement still sent shards of agony radiating from her incision site. You sure about this? Wyatt asked for the 10th time as he adjusted her seatbelt to avoid pressure on her abdomen. The doctors wanted you to stay another 3 days. We can't afford another 3 days, Callie replied, her voice tight with pain. And I can take the same medications at home. The truth was more complicated. Yes, the hospital bill was mounting with each day, even with her employee discount. But more urgently, being in the hospital meant she couldn't help manage their increasingly desperate financial situation. The rent would be due again in 2 weeks. Margaret's medication had to be refilled. Wyatt had missed shifts at the hardware store to care for their mother. And this morning, a certified letter had arrived, Wyatt's college threatening to drop him from his classes if the tuition payment wasn't received by month's end. The drive home was excruciating, every bump in the road sending fresh waves of pain through Callie's body. By the time they reached the apartment, she was pale and sweating, her teeth clenched against nausea. Margaret was waiting, her wheelchair positioned near the door. Her face crumpled when she saw Callie's condition. "Oh, my darling," she whispered. "You shouldn't have left the hospital." "I'm okay," Callie lied, allowing Wyatt to help her to the couch. "Just need to rest." The apartment had been transformed in her absence. The living room now held a makeshift bed. The couch piled with pillows, a small table within reach holding water, medications, books, and the remote control. Flowers brightened the coffee table. Modest bouquets from colleagues at the hospital and the diner. "Mabel sent food," Wyatt said, gesturing toward the kitchen. "And your supervisor dropped off those forms for your medical leave." Callie nodded, too exhausted and pained to respond properly. The forms were another worry. She needed to submit them immediately to ensure her job remained protected, but the thought of dealing with paperwork felt overwhelming. The first week at home passed in a haze of pain medication, fitful sleep, and growing anxiety. Callie had known recovery would be difficult, but the reality was far worse than her expectations. Simple tasks, sitting up, walking to the bathroom, changing her clothes, required monumental effort. Worse was the feeling of uselessness. For years, Callie had been the caregiver, the provider, the one who held their family together. Now, she watched as Wyatt struggled to balance his classes, his job, and caring for both her and their mother. She saw the dark circles under his eyes, heard him on the phone with bill collectors, pleading for more time. 10 days after surgery, a certified letter arrived from their landlord. Rent was past due, and if not paid within 7 days, eviction proceedings would begin. "I thought we paid rent for this month," Callie said, confused, as Wyatt showed her the notice. "We did," he said grimly. "They raised it. Another $50 a month, effective immediately. The check we sent wasn't enough. Can we cover the difference?" Wyatt's silence was answer enough. "The emergency fund," Callie suggested. "In my dresser drawer." "Already used it," Wyatt admitted. "For Mom's medication. The insurance denied the refill, said it was too soon. We had to pay out of pocket." Callie closed her eyes, fighting the wave of helplessness threatening to overwhelm her. Their careful financial balance, always precarious, had completely collapsed in her absence. "What about your tuition?" she asked, though she already knew the answer. "I withdrew from my classes," Wyatt said quietly. "Got a partial refund. It's what's keeping us afloat right now." The news hit Callie like a physical blow. Wyatt's education had been their priority, their hope for a better future. She'd worked double shifts, skipped meals, sold her father's watch, all to keep him in school. "No," she whispered. "Wyatt, we'll find another way." "There is no other way, Cal," he said, his voice gentle but firm. "Not right now. I can re-enroll next semester. If there was money next semester. If they still had a place to live. If. 2 weeks after surgery, Callie received a call from Chun. "How are you feeling?" the transplant coordinator asked. "Better every day," Callie lied, shifting carefully to find a less painful position. The truth was, she'd pushed herself too hard, tried to do too much, and her recovery had stalled. "Good to hear," Chun said, though her tone suggested skepticism. "I'm actually calling about Elliot. He's being discharged tomorrow, and he's asked to see you." Callie hesitated. She wasn't sure she was ready to see Elliot. Not like this, weak and vulnerable, their roles so completely reversed. "Just a brief visit," Chun pressed. "It would mean a lot to him." "Fine," Callie relented. "Tomorrow afternoon." After hanging up, she forced herself to stand, moving carefully to the bathroom. The face that greeted her in the mirror was a shadow of her former self, pale, drawn, dark circles beneath her eyes. She looked like her patients, not like a nurse. Could she let Elliot see her this way? Did she have a choice? The next day, Wyatt helped her wash her hair and change into fresh clothes, the first time she'd worn anything but pajamas since coming home. The effort exhausted her, but she refused to receive Elliot looking like an invalid. At precisely 2 o'clock, a knock sounded at the apartment door. Wyatt answered, and Callie heard murmured voices in the hallway. Then footsteps, and Elliot appeared in the living room doorway. He looked transformed from the gaunt, dying man she'd known in the hospital. Though still thin, color had returned to his face. He stood straight, moving with the careful deliberation of a recent surgical patient, but without the desperate weakness he'd shown before. His eyes, once dulled by illness, now shone with clear purpose. "Callie," he said, his voice full of emotion. "Finally." She smiled, suddenly shy. "You look good. Thanks to you." He approached slowly, taking in her makeshift bed on the couch, the pill bottles on the side table, the obvious signs of her difficult recovery. "May I sit?" She nodded, indicating the chair beside her. Wyatt hovered in the doorway, clearly uncertain whether to leave them alone. "You must be Wyatt," Elliot said, extending his hand. "I've heard a lot about you." Wyatt shook his hand, his expression guarded. "Likewise. Would you mind if I spoke with your sister privately for a few minutes?" Wyatt looked to Callie, who nodded. "I'll be in the kitchen if you need me," he said, disappearing through the doorway. "He's protective," Elliot observed once they were alone. "As he should be." "It's been hard on him," Callie admitted. "Taking care of me, trying to keep everything going." Elliot nodded, his eyes taking in the cramped apartment, the water stain on the ceiling, the well-worn furniture. "I owe you a debt I can never repay." "You don't owe me anything," Callie insisted. "It was my choice." Nevertheless, he reached into his jacket, withdrawing an envelope. "I've brought something for you." Callie eyed the envelope warily. "What's that?" "Open it," he urged, placing it in her hands. Inside was a check with so many zeros that Callie was certain she was misreading it. "I don't understand," she whispered. "It's a small token of my gratitude," Elliot said simply. "Enough to cover your medical expenses, lost wages, and perhaps a bit more." Callie stared at the check, then at Elliot, her mind racing to catch up with this unexpected development. This is too much. I can't accept this." "You can," he countered, his voice gentle but firm. "And you will. Because tomorrow, something extraordinary is going to happen. Something that will change everything for you and your family." Have you ever had a moment when your entire world shifted, when an act of kindness returned to you multiplied beyond imagination? What would you do if the person whose life you saved turned out to have the power to transform yours? The next part of this remarkable story shows how the wheels of fate sometimes turn in unexpected ways, rewarding those who give without thought of return. If this story of sacrifice and unexpected reward touches your heart, please subscribe to our channel for more incredible true stories that remind us of the power of human connection. Let us know in the comments if you've ever experienced an unexpected blessing after helping someone in need. How would you react if someone offered you a life-changing gift that seemed too good to be true? Would you accept it gratefully, or would pride make you hesitate? For most of us, these questions remain hypothetical, but for Callie Braddock, they became very real as she faced the most unexpected consequence of her generous act. If stories about everyday heroes receiving unexpected blessings move you, please subscribe to our channel. Your support allows us to continue sharing these remarkable true stories of kindness rewarded in ways no one could anticipate. Leave a comment telling us about a time when your good deed was repaid in an unexpected way. Callie stared at the check in her hands, unable to process the number of zeros that followed the first digits. Her mind refused to accept what she was seeing. "Elliot," she finally managed, her voice barely above a whisper, "this is $100,000. He nodded, his expression calm. "Consider it compensation for your medical expenses, lost wages, and the tremendous inconvenience my kidney failure has caused you." She tried to hand the check back to him, but he gently pushed her hand away. "This isn't why I did it," she insisted. "I didn't donate my kidney for money." "I know," Elliot said softly. "That's precisely why you deserve it." Callie looked down at the check again, then back at Elliot. There was something different about him now, beyond the improved health, beyond the color in his cheeks. An air of authority, of quiet command that hadn't been evident in the hospital bed. "Who are you?" she asked suddenly. "Really?" A smile touched his lips. "That's part of what I meant about tomorrow. I'd like you to come to my office, my real office." There's something important I need to tell you. Your office. Callie echoed, confusion evident in her voice. My assistant will call in the morning with details. He stood carefully, mindful of his own healing incision. Please come, Callie, and bring Wyatt and your mother if possible. This concerns all of you. With that cryptic statement, he bid her goodbye, leaving Callie staring at the check in her hands, her mind whirling with questions. Wyatt returned to the living room after Elliot had gone. What was that about? He asked, eyeing the paper in Callie's hand. Wordlessly, she handed him the check. His eyes widened, his mouth falling open in shock. Is this real? He demanded. $100,000? From the guy you gave a kidney to? Apparently, Callie said, still trying to process it herself. And he wants us to come to his office tomorrow. All of us, including Mom. Wyatt sank onto the couch beside her. His office. I thought he was just some regular guy. So did I, Callie murmured. Now I'm not so sure. That night, sleep eluded her. The check lay on her bedside table, its presence both reassuring and troubling. $100,000 would solve their immediate problems, pay off medical bills, cover rent for months, allow Wyatt to re-enroll in college. But it felt wrong somehow, as if accepting the money would transform her act of compassion into a transaction. And what did Elliot mean about his real office? Who was he really? Morning brought no clarity, but it did bring the promised phone call. Callie was attempting to make breakfast, a small step toward normalcy, despite the pain that still accompanied every movement, when her phone rang. Ms. Braddock, a crisp, professional female voice greeted her. This is Andrea Bennett, Mr. Mercer's executive assistant. He's asked me to arrange transportation for you and your family to our main office today at 2 p.m. Will that time work for you? Yes, I suppose so, Callie replied, thrown by the formality. But we can drive ourselves. We don't need transportation. Mr. Mercer insists, Andrea replied firmly. A car will collect you at 1:30. The driver's name is Michael. Will your mother and brother be accompanying you? Yes, they will, Callie confirmed, increasingly confused by the situation. Excellent. Please don't hesitate to call if you need anything before then. After hanging up, Callie stared at her phone. Executive assistant? Main office. What exactly did Elliot Mercer do for a living? By early afternoon, a nervous energy had taken hold of the Braddock household. Margaret had insisted on wearing her best dress, a floral print she saved for special occasions. Wyatt had actually ironed a shirt, something Callie couldn't remember him doing since high school graduation. And Callie herself had spent longer than usual on her appearance, trying to look more like her pre-surgery self, though the gauntness in her face and the careful way she moved betrayed her ongoing recovery. At precisely 1:30, a sleek black luxury car pulled up outside their apartment building. The driver, a courteous man in a dark suit, helped Margaret into the back seat, folded her wheelchair into the trunk, and ensured everyone was comfortable before pulling away from the curb. Where exactly are we going? Callie asked. Mercer Tower, downtown, the driver replied. Wyatt and Callie exchanged startled glances. Mercer Tower was one of the newest, most prestigious buildings in the city's skyline, a gleaming glass structure that housed several high-profile financial and tech companies. I think, Margaret said quietly, we're about to discover that your patient is rather more than he seemed. The car glided through downtown traffic, eventually pulling up to the imposing entrance of Mercer Tower. The driver helped them out, retrieving Margaret's wheelchair and escorting them through the soaring lobby to a private elevator bank. A security guard nodded respectfully. Mr. Mercer's office. Top floor. The elevator ascended swiftly, its smooth movement barely perceptible. Callie felt her heart rate accelerating, a strange mix of anticipation and apprehension flooding her system. Who was Elliot Mercer? The elevator doors opened directly into a reception area that spoke of understated wealth, gleaming hardwood floors, artfully arranged fresh flowers, and a sweeping view of the city through floor-to-ceiling windows. A woman rose from behind an elegant desk, her smile professional and welcoming. Ms. Braddock, Mrs. Braddock, Mr. Braddock, she greeted them, as if their arrival at this rarefied height was the most natural thing in the world. I'm Andrea Bennett. Mr. Mercer is expecting you. Please follow me. She led them through double doors into a spacious corner office where Elliot stood waiting beside a large conference table. He looked transformed from the man they'd seen yesterday, dressed in an impeccably tailored suit, his posture straight and confident despite his recent surgery. The office around him radiated power and success, Awards and accolades displayed on shelves, original artwork on the walls, and beyond the windows, a commanding view of the entire city. "Callie," he greeted her warmly, then nodded to her family. "Margaret Wyatt, thank you for coming. Please sit down." As they settled around the conference table, Margaret's wheelchair accommodated with smooth efficiency, Callie found her voice. "Who are you?" she asked directly. Elliot smiled, pressing a button on the table. A section of wall slid aside, revealing a large screen. An image appeared, the front page of a business magazine with Elliot's face on the cover. The headline read, "Mercer, the quiet titan reshaping American healthcare." "Elliot Mercer," he said simply, "founder and CEO of Mercer Health Technologies. We develop medical devices, software systems, and treatment protocols for hospitals and healthcare networks across the country and increasingly around the world." Wyatt leaned forward, eyes wide. "You're that Mercer? Your company makes the digital charting system our hospital uses." "Among other things, yes," Elliot confirmed. Callie felt as if the floor had dropped away beneath her. The quiet, philosophical patient she'd come to know in the hospital, the man she'd given her kidney to, was one of the wealthiest individuals in the country. A healthcare magnate whose name she'd heard countless times without making the connection. "Why didn't you tell me?" she asked, a hint of accusation in her voice. "Would it have mattered?" Elliot countered gently. "Would you have treated me differently if you'd known?" She wanted to say no, that of course she would have provided the same care, made the same decision. But honesty compelled her to consider the question more deeply. Would knowledge of his wealth and status have created a barrier between them? Would it have made her more guarded, less authentic in their conversations? "Maybe," she admitted finally, "but not in the way you might think. I might have been more careful around you." Elliot nodded, as if her answer confirmed something he'd suspected. "That's precisely why I didn't tell you. In the hospital, stripped of status and power, connected to monitors and dependent on others for basic needs, it creates a rare kind of equality. For the first time in decades, people spoke to me as a person, not as a position." "But why keep it from me after I offered to donate?" Callie pressed. "That was a major decision, one I should have made with full information." "You made it with the only information that mattered," Elliot countered. "You chose to save a fellow human being, not a wealthy man who could reward you. That distinction is important to me." Margaret cleared her throat softly. "Mr. Mercer, while I appreciate your desire for authenticity, I believe my daughter deserves to know why we're here today." Elliot inclined his head respectfully. Direct and to the point. "I see where Callie gets it from." He turned to Callie. "You're right to question my methods. And you deserve complete transparency now." He reached for a folder on the table, opening it to reveal several legal documents. "What I'm about to offer you requires context," he began. 15 years ago, I was diagnosed with a rare autoimmune disorder that eventually led to my kidney failure. The prognosis was poor from the beginning, but I had resources most patients don't. The best specialists, experimental treatments, privileged access to care. It bought me time, but not a cure. His expression grew somber. "During those years, I built my company with a focus on democratizing healthcare access, creating systems and technologies that could bring high-quality care to everyone, not just those with wealth and connections. But as my condition worsened, I became more focused on my mortality than my mission." Elliot rose carefully, moving to the window. "When I was admitted to St. Agnes, I was at my lowest point, physically and spiritually. I'd chosen a public hospital deliberately, wanting to experience healthcare as most Americans do. What I found there was you, Callie." He turned to face her, his expression intense. "A nurse working double shifts, caring for her family, struggling financially, and yet still capable of extraordinary compassion and personal sacrifice. You reminded me why I started my company in the first place." Callie shifted uncomfortably under his gaze. "I was just doing my job." "No," Elliot said firmly. "What you did went far beyond your job. You gave me a part of yourself, literally. And in doing so, you didn't just save my life. You renewed my purpose." He returned to the table, sliding the folder toward her. "Which brings me to why you're here today. I want to establish a foundation in your name, the Callie Braddock Healthcare Equity Initiative. Initial funding of $20 million, with an annual commitment of $5 million for the next decade. The mission will be to support healthcare workers who face financial hardship while providing exceptional care to others." Callie stared at him, certain she had misheard. $20 million? With you as executive director, should you choose to accept. Full salary, benefits, and a flexible schedule that would allow you to continue nursing if you wish. The foundation would provide emergency financial support, educational scholarships, childcare assistance, and mental health resources to healthcare workers in need. The room fell silent. Wyatt looked as if he might fall out of his chair. Margaret reached for Callie's hand, squeezing it gently. This is too much, Callie finally managed. I can't possibly. It's not charity, Elliot interrupted. It's investment in a vision I believe in, one you embodied through your actions. And yes, there would be personal benefits for your family as well. He turned to Wyatt. A full scholarship to complete your education. And for your mother, access to an experimental treatment program for Parkinson's that my company is developing. Margaret gasped softly. How did you know about my condition? I make it my business to understand the people who matter to me, Elliot replied simply. And your family matters to me now, Callie. Whether you accept this offer or not. Callie felt overwhelmed, unable to process the magnitude of what was being proposed. A foundation in her name. Financial security for her family. The chance to help others facing the same struggles she'd known. It was too much. Too sudden. Too transformative. I need time, she said finally. To think about this. Elliot nodded, unsurprised. Of course. Take all the time you need. He closed the folder and handed it to her. All the details are in here. My contact information, the preliminary foundation charter, the scholarship documentation for Wyatt, information about the Parkinson's treatment program. Review it, discuss it as a family, ask any questions that arise. Andrea appeared in the doorway, as if summoned by some invisible signal. Your car is ready whenever you wish to leave, she informed them. Callie rose shakily, the folder clutched in her hands. Thank you for everything. Elliot stepped forward, his expression earnest. Callie, whatever you decide about the foundation, please accept the check I gave you yesterday. You've incurred significant expenses and lost income because of your generosity. That's the minimum I can do in return. She nodded, unable to form a coherent response. The reality of their situation, the overdue rent, Wyatt's tuition, her mother's medication costs, made refusal of the check impractical, regardless of her discomfort with accepting it. The ride home passed in stunned silence. Only when they were back in their apartment, the door closed behind them, did $20 million, Wyatt said, his voice rising with each word. $20 million. And a scholarship, Margaret added, her hands trembling more than usual with excitement. Wyatt, you can go back to school immediately. And that treatment program for you, Mom, Wyatt continued, pacing energetically. Did you hear that? Experimental treatments from Mercer Health Technologies. They're leaders in neurological research. Callie sank onto the couch, watching her family's excitement with a curious detachment. While they saw opportunity and solutions, she felt something more complex, a strange mixture of gratitude, disbelief, and uneasiness. Aren't you happy? Margaret asked, wheeling closer to her daughter. This solves everything. Does it? Callie countered softly. Or does it just create a whole new set of problems? Wyatt stopped pacing. What problems could possibly be worse than the ones we have now? Callie opened the folder, spreading the documents across the coffee table. The foundation charter. The executive director contract with a salary that made her nursing income look like pocket change. The scholarship papers for Wyatt. Information about the Parkinson's treatment program. I donated my kidney to help someone in need, she said slowly. Not to get a job offer. Not to secure our financial future. Just to help another human being. Taking all this feels like it changes what I did. Makes it transactional. That's ridiculous, Wyatt protested. You didn't know who he was. You had no expectation of reward. Exactly, Margaret agreed. Your act was completely selfless. His response is his choice, just as your donation was yours. Callie ran her fingers over the foundation charter, reading its mission statement. To support healthcare workers who provide exceptional care while facing personal hardship, ensuring that those who care for others are themselves cared for. It was a beautiful vision, one that resonated deeply with her own values and experiences. How many nurses, aides, and technicians did she know who struggled financially while providing compassionate care? Who worked multiple jobs, skipped meals, delayed seeking their own medical treatment because they couldn't afford time off. I'd need to quit my job at the diner, she said, thinking aloud. Maybe reduce my hours at the hospital, at least during the foundation's startup phase. Yes, Margaret agreed cautiously, sensing Callie's thoughts shifting. And we'd move. Find a place with better accessibility for you, closer to your doctors. That would be wonderful, her mother admitted. Wyatt would go back to school full-time. No more juggling classes and work. Wyatt nodded eagerly. I could graduate on schedule, maybe even apply to graduate programs. Callie picked up the contract, staring at the salary figure. More money than she'd ever imagined earning. Security. Stability. The end of constant financial anxiety. And yet, it's too much, she whispered. I didn't do anything to deserve all this. Margaret wheeled closer, taking Callie's hand in her trembling ones. My darling girl, for your entire life, you've given and given and given, to me, to Wyatt, to your patients. You've sacrificed your own dreams, your own needs, to care for others. Why is it so hard to believe you deserve something in return? But this isn't just something, Callie protested. This is life-changing. For all of us. Yes, Margaret agreed simply. It is. And life-changing is exactly what you gave to Elliot Mercer when you donated your kidney. Not just extending his life, but transforming it, giving it new meaning and purpose. Wyatt sat beside his sister. Cal, remember when Dad died? How you dropped out of college to come home, to take care of Mom and me. You were 19, the same age I am now. You gave up everything. I didn't have a choice, Callie said softly. You did, Wyatt countered. You could have stayed in school, sent money when possible, let me go into foster care. But you chose us. You've always chosen others. Maybe it's time to let someone choose you. Tears filled Callie's eyes. The weight of years of responsibility, of constant sacrifice and worry, suddenly felt tangible. A burden she'd carried for so long she'd stopped noticing its pressure. Could she accept this gift? This chance to help not just her family, but countless other healthcare workers facing the same struggles she had known? To transform her personal sacrifice into a force for systemic change? Her phone buzzed with a text message. Elliot, no pressure. No timeline. But when you're ready to talk, I'm here. Callie looked around their small apartment, the water stain on the ceiling, the threadbare carpet, the second-hand furniture. Then at her mother, whose trembling hands held such strength and love. At her brother, whose future had been circumscribed by their financial limitations. At the medication bottles on the counter, each one a monthly challenge to afford. She thought of Elliot Mercer, not the wealthy CEO in the penthouse office, but the patient in the hospital bed who had discussed philosophy with her during night shifts, who had listened to her dreams and fears with genuine interest, who had seen her truly. I need to think, she said finally. This isn't just about money. It's about our whole lives changing. About who I am and who I want to be. Margaret nodded. Take all the time you need, sweetheart. We'll support whatever you decide. That night, Callie sat on their small balcony, watching the city lights flicker in the distance. Mercer Tower stood among them, illuminated against the night sky, a physical manifestation of the choice before her. Accept Elliot's offer, and everything would change. Their financial struggles would end. Wyatt could complete his education. Margaret could access cutting-edge treatment. And Callie herself could help countless other healthcare workers facing the challenges she knew so intimately. Refuse and maintain the purity of her original act, a gift given with no expectation of return. Continue the life they knew, with all its hardships and uncertainties. The night offered no clear answer, but as she watched Mercer Tower gleaming in the distance, Callie felt something shift within her. Not certainty exactly, but openness. Readiness to consider a future different from anything she had imagined. Tomorrow, she would call Elliot. Not with a decision, but with questions. About the foundation. About his vision. About where she might fit within it. For tonight, it was enough to sit quietly, holding the possibility of transformation in her hands like a fragile, precious thing. Not yet embraced, but no longer rejected. Change was coming. The only question was what form it would take. Have you ever faced a moment when your life could completely transform? When an unexpected opportunity appeared that felt both miraculous and overwhelming. Life's most profound changes often arrive in disguise, through acts of kindness that return to us multiplied, through challenges that reveal hidden strengths, through people who see value in us that we ourselves have overlooked. If this story resonates with you, please subscribe to our channel for more incredible true stories about ordinary people facing extraordinary circumstances. Your support helps us continue sharing these powerful narratives that remind us how unexpected blessings can find us when we're brave enough to help others. Let us know in the comments. Would you accept a life-changing gift from someone whose life you saved? What would you do if your act of kindness was rewarded beyond your wildest dreams? How does a person's life transform when financial struggles suddenly disappear? This story continues as our heroic nurse faces the reality of accepting a life-changing gift from the billionaire whose life she saved, and discovers that the greatest challenge isn't surviving hardship, but embracing abundance. Have you ever wondered how it would feel to have your most pressing problems solved overnight? Do you think money can fix everything, or does sudden wealth bring its own unique challenges? For most people, financial windfalls remain a daydream, but for Callie Braddock, this fantasy became an unexpected reality that tested her identity in ways she never anticipated. If you're inspired by stories of everyday heroes whose lives are transformed through unexpected blessings, please subscribe to our channel. Your support enables us to continue sharing these remarkable true stories of ordinary people whose extraordinary acts of kindness lead to life-changing rewards. Let us know in the comments if you believe you would accept a billionaire's gift or if pride would make you hesitate. The morning after their visit to Mercer Tower, Callie woke early, her mind clearer than it had been in weeks. The folder Elliot had given her lay on her bedside table, its contents representing possibilities that had seemed impossible just days ago. She reached for her phone and composed a simple text. "Can we meet today? I have questions." Elliot's response came almost immediately. "My office, whenever you're ready. Or I can come to you if that's easier." Callie considered. Her surgical recovery still made movement painful, but she needed neutral ground for this conversation. Not the intimidating corporate environment of Mercer Tower, but also not the cramped vulnerability of her apartment. The cafe across from St. Agnes Hospital. 11 a.m., she suggested. "I'll be there," Elliot confirmed. Margaret was awake when Callie emerged from her room, seated in her wheelchair by the window where the morning light illuminated her face. Her tremors were pronounced today. A bad day, by their usual measure. "You've decided," Margaret observed quietly, always perceptive where her daughter was concerned. "Not entirely," Callie admitted, carefully lowering herself into the chair opposite her mother. "But I'm ready to talk more seriously with Elliot." Margaret nodded, her gaze direct despite her shaking hands. "What's holding you back, my love?" Callie considered the question. "Pride, maybe. Fear, definitely. The feeling that I don't deserve something this enormous." "And what would you tell a patient who expressed those feelings? If someone came to you for advice about accepting help they desperately needed?" Callie smiled ruefully. "You know me too well." "I should hope so. I raised you." Margaret reached out, her trembling hand finding Callie's. "You've carried our family for years without complaint. Perhaps it's time to let someone else help carry for a while." By 11 o'clock, Callie was seated at a corner table in the cafe, nursing a cup of tea. The familiar sounds and smells provided comfort. This was a place she'd come countless times after difficult shifts, finding solace in its warmth and normalcy. Elliot arrived precisely on time, dressed more casually than he had been in his office, but still exuding an aura of quiet authority. He ordered a coffee and joined her, his expression open and expectant. "Thank you for meeting me," Callie began. "Thank you for being willing to continue the conversation," he replied. She took a deep breath. "I've been thinking about your offer. About the foundation. I have questions." "I'd be concerned if you didn't," Elliot said with a smile. "Ask anything." "Why me?" It was the most fundamental question, the one that had kept her awake. "There must be thousands of healthcare workers with stories like mine. Why choose me for this?" Elliot considered her question carefully. "Because you embody everything the foundation stands for. You provide exceptional care despite personal hardship. You put others before yourself, often at significant personal cost. And most importantly, you did something extraordinary without expectation of reward." He paused, his gaze direct. "But if you're asking whether this is solely about you, the answer is no. It's about creating systemic change, addressing a need I've observed throughout the healthcare industry. You're not just the inspiration, you're the ideal person to lead it, because you understand the challenges firsthand." Callie nodded slowly. "The executive director position. What would that actually involve?" "Day-to-day. Initially, establishing the foundation's infrastructure. Developing application processes for financial assistance programs. Building partnerships with hospitals and nursing schools. Creating awareness among healthcare workers who might need help." He leaned forward. "But ultimately, Callie, the foundation would be yours to shape. Your vision, your priorities. I don't have experience running a foundation, she pointed out. No management background, no finance training. We'd provide whatever support you need, legal, financial, administrative. You'd have a full team. Elliot's expression softened. What you bring is more valuable than technical skills. You bring authenticity, lived experience, and genuine passion for helping others. For the next hour, Callie asked question after question about oversight, reporting structures, timeline, expectations. Elliot answered each one patiently, with the clarity of someone who had given significant thought to the proposal. Finally, Callie fell silent, turning her empty teacup in her hands. One last question, she said quietly. If I accept this, all of it, the foundation, the money, the treatments for my mother, the scholarship for Wyatt, what do you expect in return? Elliot met her gaze steadily. That you use it well. That you help others as you've helped me. That you allow my gift to you to become your gift to the world. He smiled slightly. Also, occasional kidney function updates would be appreciated. A laugh escaped her, surprising in its genuine warmth. I think I can manage that. So, he asked, his expression hopeful. What are you thinking? Callie took a deep breath, the weight of decision settling around her shoulders, not a burden this time, but a purpose. Yes, she said simply. Yes to all of it. Elliot's smile transformed his face, erasing years and illuminating the man she'd first come to know in the hospital, thoughtful, vulnerable, deeply human despite his extraordinary circumstances. You won't regret this, he promised. I might, she warned, though her own smile belied the words. But we'll figure it out. The phrase felt different now, not a desperate hope in the face of overwhelming odds, but a statement of collaborative possibility. The immediate effects of Callie's decision rippled outward with breathtaking speed. That afternoon, Elliot's legal team delivered revised contracts and documents for her signature. By evening, the first installment of her salary had been deposited, along with the original $100,000 check she had finally agreed to accept. We should make a plan, Callie told her family that night, spreading papers across their kitchen table. Prioritize what needs to happen first. Wyatt, for once, was prepared. He produced a handwritten list. Rent plus back payments, mom's medications, my tuition, car repairs, medical bills. Cross off tuition, Callie instructed. That's covered separately through the scholarship. And add house hunting. We need a place that's fully accessible for mom, preferably closer to the treatment center. Margaret watched her children with glistening eyes. I keep thinking I'll wake up and discover this was all a dream. Not a dream, Callie assured her. Just a very unexpected turn of events. The following week brought changes so rapid they seemed almost unreal. The back rent was paid, removing the threat of eviction. Wyatt registered for classes, his academic standing reinstated through Elliot's intervention. And Margaret had her first consultation at Mercer Health Technologies Neurological Research Center, where she was formally accepted into the experimental treatment program. The approach combines gene therapy with targeted medication, the neurologist explained during the initial appointment. Early results show significant reduction in tremors and slowed disease progression in over 70% of participants. Margaret's hands trembled in her lap. And the cost? Is fully covered, the doctor assured her. You're a special case, Mrs. Braddock. Mr. Mercer has taken a personal interest in your treatment. Because of my daughter, Margaret said softly. The doctor smiled. You raised quite an extraordinary young woman. By the end of the second week, they had found a new home, a ground-floor apartment in a modern building with wide doorways, accessible bathroom fixtures, and an open floor plan that would accommodate Margaret's wheelchair. The rent was triple what they'd paid before, but now comfortably within their means. It has 3 bedrooms. Wyatt marveled as they toured the space. We've never had 3 bedrooms. One for each of us, Callie confirmed. No more sleeping on the couch. Moving day arrived with a flurry of activity. Elliot had insisted on providing professional movers, overriding Callie's protests that they could manage themselves. You're still recovering from major surgery, he reminded her. Let someone else do the heavy lifting. Literally. As the movers packed up their modest belongings, Callie was struck by how little they actually owned, how few material possessions represented their years in the apartment that had been their home. Some furniture, mostly secondhand. Clothes, often mended. Kitchen items, mismatched and well-used. Photo albums and mementos that held their family history. Yet watching these items being carefully wrapped and packed, Callie felt an unexpected wave of emotion. These humble possessions represented years of struggle, sacrifice, and love. Each worn item told a story of their resilience. "We don't have to take everything," Wyatt suggested, noticing her expression. "We could start fresh." Callie shook her head. "No, these things matter. They remind us where we came from." In their new apartment, their familiar belongings looked almost out of place against the pristine walls and gleaming floors. Callie insisted on arranging their old family photos and mementos prominently, creating a bridge between their past and this startling new present. "It doesn't quite feel like home yet," Margaret observed as they ate dinner together that first night, seated at their scratched kitchen table in the sleek new dining area. "It will," Callie assured her. "Just give it time." Time, suddenly, was a luxury they possessed. With financial pressures lifted, the frantic pace of their lives slowed. Callie no longer needed to rush from hospital shift to diner job. Wyatt could focus on his studies without juggling work hours. Margaret could attend her treatment sessions without worrying about the cost or burdening her children with her care. This newfound freedom created its own kind of disorientation. After years of constant motion, the stillness felt almost uncomfortable. "I don't know what to do with myself," Callie admitted to Elliot during one of their regular check-ins. They had established a routine of weekly meetings, sometimes at his office, sometimes over coffee, to discuss her recovery and the developing foundation plans. "I've never had this much space in my life." "It's a common reaction," he told her. "When survival no longer consumes all your energy, you have to figure out what living actually means to you." 3 weeks after their move, Margaret returned from a treatment session with news. "The doctors say they're seeing improvement already," she reported, holding out her hands. The tremors, while still present, were visibly reduced. "It's preliminary but promising." Callie enfolded her mother in a careful hug, mindful of her own still-healing incision. "That's wonderful, Mom. I thought I'd made peace with this disease," Margaret confessed, her voice muffled against Callie's shoulder. "With the limitations, the dependency. I'd accepted that it would only get worse. And now," she pulled back, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "Now I'm allowing myself to hope again." Hope. It was a luxury they'd rationed carefully for years, allowing themselves only small, practical hopes, for stable shifts, for stretching groceries until payday, for appliances lasting another season. Now their horizons expanded daily, possibilities multiplying like stars appearing in a darkening sky. For Wyatt, this new reality manifested in his renewed focus on education. He threw himself into his studies with an intensity that surprised his professors, earning recognition and academic opportunities that had previously seemed out of reach. "Professor Jenkins wants me to apply for a summer research position," he announced one evening. "Says my paper on healthcare policy inequities was graduate-level work." "That's amazing," Callie told him, genuinely proud. Her brother had always been brilliant. Their circumstances, not his capacity, had limited his achievements. "It's because of you," Wyatt said suddenly, his expression serious. "Not just the money or the scholarship. All those years you worked extra shifts so I could stay in school. You never gave up on my education, even when we could barely afford rent." "That's what family does," Callie replied simply. "No," Wyatt corrected gently. "That's what you did, and I'll never forget it." For Callie herself, the transition proved more complex. Her physical recovery progressed steadily, the surgical pain fading, her energy returning gradually. But emotionally, she found herself navigating unfamiliar territory. For so long, her identity had been defined by struggle and sacrifice. She was the responsible one, the provider, the caregiver. Now, with those urgent needs addressed, she faced a more fundamental question. Who was Callie Braddock beyond her responsibilities? The foundation work provided partial answers. For weeks after accepting Elliot's offer, she began working from a temporary office in Mercer Tower while the foundation's permanent space was being prepared. With guidance from Elliot's team, she developed the initial programs and priorities for the Callie Braddock Healthcare Equity Initiative. "We'll start with emergency financial assistance," she decided, outlining her vision during a planning meeting. "Targeting nurses, aides, and support staff facing crisis situations, eviction, medical emergencies, family needs. Focusing on immediate relief," Elliot noted approvingly. "Smart approach. Because I know firsthand that it's impossible to provide good care when you're worried about keeping your lights on or feeding your family," Callie explained. "Long-term solutions matter, but crisis intervention comes." Her experience, the The very struggles that had made her life so difficult now became her greatest asset. She understood exactly what healthcare workers needed because she had lived those needs. Her perspective shaped every aspect of the Foundation's development, from application procedures designed to preserve applicants' dignity to disbursement timelines that recognized the urgency of financial emergencies. "You were made for this," Elliot observed after watching her confidently lead a meeting with potential hospital partners. "Your passion is undeniable." Callie smiled, recognizing the truth in his words. The work energized her in a way that even nursing, a profession she loved, never had. Here, she could address the systemic issues that had affected her own life, creating change that extended far beyond individual patient care. Yet alongside this professional fulfillment, quieter personal adjustments continued. Simple luxuries, buying groceries without calculating each item's cost, replacing worn clothes without waiting for sales, scheduling a doctor's appointment without worrying about the copay, still felt novel, almost transgressive. "I bought coffee today without checking the price," she confessed to Margaret one evening. "Just ordered what I wanted without thinking about it. It felt so strange." Margaret smiled. "You've earned that right, my love. 1,000 times over." 6 weeks after surgery, Callie returned to St. Agnes for a follow-up appointment. Walking through the familiar hallways felt like visiting a past life, one she had inhabited just months ago, but that already seemed distant. Dr. Patel greeted her warmly. "Our celebrity patient returns. How are you feeling?" "Better every day," Callie replied honestly, "physically and otherwise." The examination confirmed her good recovery. Her remaining kidney was functioning perfectly, compensating as expected. Her incision was healing well. All lab values looked excellent. "Any regrets?" Dr. Patel asked as she concluded the examination. Callie considered the question carefully. "About the donation?" "Not for a second. About everything that's happened since." She smiled. "I'm still adjusting. But no regrets." After her appointment, Callie found herself drawn to the critical care unit, the place where her connection with Elliot had begun. She didn't go inside, just stood outside the double doors, remembering. Rodriguez spotted her from the nurse's station. "Braddock," he called, coming to greet her. "We heard you went all fancy on us. Running a foundation now." "Still in the planning stages," she corrected, accepting his brief hug. "How's everything here?" "Same old chaos. Understaffed, overworked." He studied her face. "You look good. Happy." "I am," she realized, surprised by how true it felt. Different but happy. "You coming back to nursing?" Rodriguez asked. "We miss you around here." "Eventually," Callie confirmed. "Part-time. I can't give it up completely." Nursing had been her anchor through the hardest years of her life. The connection with patients, the tangible impact of compassionate care, these remained essential to her sense of self. The foundation would allow her to create broader change, but direct patient care would keep her grounded in the human realities behind the policies and programs. That evening, Callie returned to their new apartment to find Wyatt cooking dinner, a skill he'd recently discovered an interest in developing, while Margaret reviewed materials from her treatment program. The scene of domestic tranquility struck Callie with unexpected force. For years, she had carried the weight of constant worry, about money, about Margaret's health, about Wyatt's future, about their survival from day to day. That weight had become so familiar she'd stopped noticing it. Now, in its absence, she felt almost weightless, unmoored from the gravity that had kept her tethered. "Everything okay?" Margaret asked, noticing Callie standing silently in the doorway. "Yes," Callie said, moving to join her family. "Better than okay." Later that night, Callie stepped onto their apartment balcony, larger and more private than the cramped outdoor space of their old home. The city spread before her, lit against the night sky. Mercer Towers stood among the buildings, windows illuminated, a beacon of the new path her life had taken. Her phone buzzed with a text from Elliot. "Foundation office space ready for your inspection tomorrow. Excited for you to see it." Callie smiled, typing back, "Looking forward to it. And kidney function remains excellent, in case you were wondering." She stayed on the balcony for a long time, watching the city lights and reflecting on the extraordinary turn her life had taken. A simple act of compassion, the decision to donate her kidney to a patient in need, had set in motion a chain of events she could never have anticipated. The foundation would launch officially in 3 weeks. Margaret's tremors continued to improve with each treatment. Wyatt was thriving in his studies, his future expanding with new possibilities. And Callie herself was discovering who she could be when survival wasn't her primary focus. What passions she could pursue, what impact she could have, what joy she could experience. There would be challenges ahead. The responsibility of managing a multi-million-dollar foundation, the learning curve of leadership, the ongoing adjustment to their new circumstances, the need to maintain perspective and purpose amid newfound privilege. But for the first time in her adult life, Callie faced the future not with anxiety, but with anticipation. Not with fear, but with hope. Not with resignation, but with possibility. She had given a piece of herself to save a stranger's life. In return, she had received not just financial security, but a chance to become more fully herself, to expand her impact, to help others facing the same struggles she had known, to create meaningful change in a healthcare system she understood from the inside out. As she turned to go back inside, to the warmth and safety of the home she shared with her family, Callie felt a deep sense of rightness settle over her. This wasn't an ending, it was a beginning, a new chapter, a fresh start, and she was ready. Have you ever noticed how life's most meaningful rewards often come when we least expect them? How the moments we choose kindness without calculation can return to us multiplied in ways we never imagined. This remarkable true story reminds us that sometimes, when we give without thought of return, we create ripples that transform not just individual lives, but entire communities. If stories of everyday heroes receiving unexpected blessings inspire you, please take a moment to subscribe to our channel. Your support allows us to continue bringing you these extraordinary narratives of courage, compassion, and life-changing rewards. Share in the comments whether you've ever experienced an unexpected blessing after helping someone else, and join our community of believers in the power of kindness to change lives. What happens when one person's selfless act creates waves of positive change that touch countless lives? How does a nurse who once struggled to pay rent transform into a powerful advocate who helps thousands of healthcare workers? Experience how Callie Braddock's extraordinary sacrifice set in motion events that would change not just her life, but an entire community of caregivers who needed support. Have you ever wondered what it would feel like to be publicly celebrated for something you did from the heart? Would you embrace the spotlight if it meant helping others, or would you shy away from recognition? For Callie, stepping into her new public role required more courage than she ever expected, and brought rewards she never anticipated. If stories of everyday heroes creating lasting change inspire you, please hit the subscribe button. Your support helps us continue sharing these remarkable true stories that remind us how one person's compassion can transform countless lives. Let us know in the comments if you've ever witnessed how a single act of kindness created a ripple effect of positive change. 6 months after the launch of the Callie Braddock Healthcare Equity Initiative, Callie stood before the mirror in her bedroom, hardly recognizing her reflection. The elegant black gown, the first formal dress she'd ever owned, had been custom-made for tonight's event. Her hair, usually pulled back in a practical ponytail, fell in soft waves around her shoulders. "You look beautiful," Margaret said from the doorway, her wheelchair gliding smoothly across the hardwood floor. The experimental treatments had dramatically reduced her tremors, allowing her greater independence than she'd experienced in years. "I feel like I'm playing dress-up," Callie admitted, smoothing the fabric nervously. "Like someone's going to realize I don't belong there." "Nonsense," Margaret countered firmly. "This foundation exists because of you. The gala is celebrating your work. No one belongs there more than you do." The Mercer Foundation's annual gala had been transformed this year into a launch celebration for the Braddock Fund, the first major initiative of Callie's foundation, dedicated to providing emergency financial assistance to healthcare workers in crisis. Tonight, before 500 of the city's most influential people, Callie would share her story and announce the fund's first round of grants. The thought made her stomach tighten with anxiety. "I'm not good at public speaking," she fretted. "What if I freeze up there?" "You won't," Wyatt assured her, appearing in his tuxedo, another first for their family. "Just talk like you did at the planning meeting last week. You were amazing." A gentle knock at the apartment door signaled their car had arrived. Elliot had insisted on sending his personal driver for the occasion. "Ready?" Wyatt asked, offering his arm with exaggerated formality. Callie took a deep breath. "As ready as I'll ever be." The Grand Hotel's ballroom had been transformed for the evening. Elegant table settings, subtle lighting, and displays highlighting the foundation's mission and early successes. As Callie entered with Wyatt and Margaret, heads turned, conversations paused. She was no longer anonymous. Her story had gained attention throughout the healthcare community and beyond. Elliot met them at the entrance, distinguished in his formal attire. The months since the transplant had been good to him. He had regained weight and strength. Though Callie's nurses, I could detect subtle signs of the ongoing challenges of being an organ recipient. The woman of the hour, he greeted her warmly, taking both her hands in his. You look magnificent. I feel terrified, she confessed quietly. He smiled. That makes two of us. Public speaking never gets easier, trust me. Their relationship had evolved in the months since the surgery, growing from the initial patient-nurse dynamic into a genuine friendship and professional partnership. Callie had come to appreciate Elliot's business acumen and strategic thinking, while he valued her practical experience and unwavering commitment to healthcare workers' needs. I've saved you seats at the main table, Elliot told them, guiding the family through the crowded room. The program starts in 30 minutes. Just enough time for you to panic appropriately. Callie laughed despite her nerves. Elliot's gentle humor had become familiar, a reminder that beneath the billionaire CEO exterior remained the thoughtful patient she'd first come to know. At the table, introductions were made to Mercer Health Technologies executives and major hospital administrators. Callie was surprised to see Rodriguez and several other nurses from St. Agnes among the guests. Couldn't miss seeing you in action, Braddock, Rodriguez told her with a grin. Besides, the food here beats hospital cafeteria any day. His familiar presence calmed her somewhat. These past 6 months had been a whirlwind of change, from establishing the foundation's infrastructure to reviewing applications for the first round of grants. Through it all, Callie had maintained her connection to direct patient care, working part-time shifts at St. Agnes. The hospital work kept her grounded, reminding her why the foundation's mission mattered so deeply. The program began with Elliot's welcome address, highlighting Mercer Health Technologies' commitment to supporting healthcare workers. As he introduced Callie, his voice softened with evident emotion. Some people say I gave Callie Braddock an opportunity, he told the audience. The truth is exactly the opposite. She gave me the most precious gift possible, not just a kidney, but a renewed sense of purpose. Tonight, we celebrate how her extraordinary compassion is creating lasting change for healthcare workers across our community. Callie approached the podium, heart pounding. The spotlight felt blinding, the audience a sea of indistinct faces. She glanced down at her prepared remarks, then set them aside. A year ago, she began, her voice gaining strength as she spoke, I was working double shifts as a nurse and waitress, struggling to support my family. When I met Elliot Mercer in the critical care unit, I had no idea he was a wealthy CEO. I just saw a patient who needed help. The room had fallen completely silent, hundreds of people hanging on her words. My decision to donate my kidney wasn't extraordinary to me. It's what healthcare workers do every day. We see need, and we respond. We give pieces of ourselves, our time, our energy, our emotional well-being, to care for others. She gestured toward Rodriguez and her former colleagues. The difference is, most healthcare workers don't get rewarded with foundations. They go back to working long hours for inadequate pay, often choosing between paying rent or buying groceries, postponing their own medical care to cover a family member's needs. Callie took a deep breath, scanning the crowd. The Braddock Fund exists to support these everyday heroes during their moments of crisis. Tonight, I'm honored to announce our first round of grants, 50 emergency financial assistance packages to healthcare workers facing critical situations. As she described the recipients, names omitted for privacy, but situations detailed, the room grew hushed. A nursing assistant facing eviction after her husband's cancer diagnosis. A hospital custodian unable to repair his car, threatening his ability to get to work. An ER nurse drowning in debt after her child's medical emergency. These are the people who care for us at our most vulnerable moments, Callie concluded. The Braddock Fund ensures that when they face their own crises, someone is there to care for them too. The applause was immediate and thunderous, the audience rising to their feet. Callie returned to her seat, legs shaking but heart full. Elliot squeezed her hand briefly, a silent acknowledgement of what they had built together. Later, as dinner was served, a tall man approached their table. He wore his tuxedo with the slight discomfort of someone unaccustomed to formal attire. Ms. Braddock, I'm Miles Hawkins, he introduced himself. Paramedic with City Emergency Services. Your foundation's work is, well, it's going to change lives. Callie smiled, immediately comfortable with his direct manner. Thank you. That's the goal. I work with people who could benefit from your programs, he continued. Would it be possible to get more information about application procedures? We have medics who are really struggling. Of course, Callie replied, genuinely interested. We're especially focused on reaching first responders. Why don't you give me your contact information? I can set up a presentation for your team. Miles grinned, revealing a dimple in his right cheek. That would be fantastic. Maybe over coffee sometime this week. Callie realized with a start that he was asking her out, professionally, yes, but with a personal interest clearly visible in his eyes. It had been so long since she'd even considered dating that she almost missed the signal. Coffee would be perfect, she agreed, surprising herself with how easily the acceptance came. After he'd gone, Wyatt leaned over with a smirk. Smooth, sis. Very smooth. Callie felt a blush warming her cheeks. It's a professional meeting. If you say so, Wyatt teased. But he couldn't take his eyes off you. The remainder of the evening passed in a blur of conversations, congratulations, and connections made. By the time the event concluded, Callie's feet ached from her unaccustomed heels, but her heart felt lighter than it had in months. The foundation was no longer just a concept or a plan. It was a living, breathing entity making tangible difference in people's lives. As the crowd thinned, Elliot joined their family for a quiet moment. Tonight exceeded all expectations, he told Callie. The donor pledges alone will fund the Braddock Fund for the next 3 years. That's wonderful, Callie replied, though she noticed Elliot seemed unusually tired, his complexion paler than it had been earlier. Are you feeling okay? He waved off her concern. Just the usual transplant fatigue. Nothing serious. But Callie's nurse's instincts had been honed by years of practice. Your anti-rejection medications were adjusted recently, weren't they? Elliot looked surprised. How did you know? Your hands have a slight tremor, and you hardly touched your dinner. She fixed him with a professional stare. Have you mentioned these symptoms to your transplant team? I have an appointment next week, he admitted. It's probably just a dosage issue. Move the appointment up, Callie instructed, slipping effortlessly into her nurse role despite her formal attire. Tomorrow, if possible. Medication side effects need prompt attention. Elliot smiled ruefully. Still my nurse after all this time. Always, Callie confirmed. That was our deal, remember? Kidney updates go both ways. 3 days later, Callie met Miles at a coffee shop near the hospital. What had been scheduled as a brief professional meeting stretched into hours as they discovered shared passions for healthcare advocacy and reform. The gaps in the system are what get me, Miles explained, gesturing emphatically. We bring people to the ER, but then what? They can't afford follow-up care, can't pay for medications, end up right back in crisis. Callie nodded. That's exactly why we're partnering with discharge planning departments, trying to create continuity of support. It's revolutionary, Miles said, his admiration evident. You've experienced these problems firsthand, and now you're actually fixing them. Trying to, Callie corrected modestly. One step at a time. When Miles asked her to dinner the following weekend, Callie accepted without hesitation. His straightforward manner and genuine passion for helping others resonated deeply with her. For the first time in her adult life, she had both the emotional space and practical freedom to consider a relationship. Their first official date revealed new dimensions to their connection. Miles had grown up in a working-class family not unlike her own, putting himself through paramedic training while supporting younger siblings. He understood sacrifice, responsibility, and the complex emotions that came with suddenly finding oneself in better circumstances. My brothers call me fancy now because I bought a new car, he told her over dinner, laughing at the memory. First new vehicle I've ever owned. They acted like I'd purchased a private jet. Callie smiled in recognition. My brother teases me about my work clothes. Says I've gone from scrub chic to foundation fancy. It's strange, isn't it? Miles reflected. Moving between worlds like this. Sometimes I still feel like I don't quite belong in either one. Exactly, Callie agreed, surprised and grateful that he understood so precisely. But maybe that's an advantage. We can see both perspectives. As summer turned to fall, Callie's life settled into new rhythms. The foundation work expanded, with regional hospitals implementing programs based on the Braddock Fund model. Her relationship with Miles deepened, built on mutual respect and shared values. Margaret's treatment continued to show promising results, and Wyatt excelled in his studies, now considering graduate programs that had once seemed impossible dreams. The only shadow was Elliot's health. The medication adjustment had resolved his immediate symptoms, but subsequent checkups revealed concerning signs of potential rejection. Though not immediately life-threatening, the situation required careful monitoring and treatment modifications. The immune system is remarkably persistent, Elliot explained during one of their weekly lunches. Mine seems particularly determined to reject your perfectly good kidney. Callie frowned, reviewing the lab results he'd shared with her. These numbers aren't what we want to see. No, he agreed calmly. But the team is optimistic about the new protocol. His apparent serenity worried Callie more than panic would have. You're downplaying this, aren't you? Elliot smiled slightly. Perhaps a bit. Professional hazard. CEOs are trained to project confidence even when concerned. His expression grew more serious. I didn't want to worry you, especially with everything going so well with the foundation. Your health matters to me, Callie told him firmly. Not just as your donor, but as your friend. No more filtering information, agreed. Agreed, he conceded, though I reserve the right to maintain appropriate optimism. Despite these concerns, Callie found herself approaching life with a newfound confidence. The frightened, overwhelmed woman who had stood on her balcony 6 months earlier, uncertain whether to accept Elliot's offer, had transformed. She now moved comfortably between board meetings and hospital floors, fundraising galas and family dinners, professional presentations. Most importantly, she had found purpose in using her unique perspective to create meaningful change. Every grant awarded, every family helped, every healthcare worker who could continue their vital work because of the foundation's support. These were the true rewards of her journey. The ripple effects of her single act of compassion continued to spread outward, touching lives far beyond what she could have imagined when she first offered her kidney to a patient in need. As Callie often reminded her team, we're not just providing financial assistance, we're recognizing value in those who give so much to others. And in that recognition, lives were changing, including her own. Have you ever considered how one decision can set in motion a chain of events that transforms not just your life, but countless others? What might happen if you chose courage over comfort, generosity over self-protection? Callie Braddock's remarkable journey from struggling nurse to influential foundation leader shows us that sometimes our greatest impact comes from following our deepest values, even when the path seems uncertain. If you found this story of unexpected rewards and lasting change inspiring, please subscribe to our channel for more extraordinary true stories of everyday heroes. Your subscription helps us continue sharing these powerful narratives that remind us all of our capacity to make a difference. Comment below about a time when you witnessed someone's kindness creating unexpected positive change. How does a single act of kindness change the world? What happens when one nurse's selfless decision creates a ripple effect that transforms thousands of lives? 5 years after Callie Braddock donated her kidney to a patient she barely knew, her impulsive act of compassion has built a legacy that continues to grow, proving that sometimes our most meaningful impact comes from following our heart rather than our fears. Have you ever wondered what might happen if you took that leap of faith to help someone in need? Could your small act of generosity set in motion events that reshape not just your life but countless others? While most of us will never face a decision as dramatic as donating an organ, Callie's story reminds us that every compassionate choice holds the potential for extraordinary outcomes. If you find this story of unexpected rewards and lasting impact meaningful, please take a moment to subscribe to our channel. Your support allows us to continue sharing these remarkable true stories of everyday heroes whose kindness is rewarded in ways they never could have imagined. Let us know in the comments about a time when a small act of kindness, given or received, changed the course of your life. 5 years, Callie mused, gazing out the floor-to-ceiling windows of the Foundation's headquarters. Sometimes it feels like yesterday, and sometimes it feels like another lifetime. Elliot nodded, joining her at the window. I was just thinking the same thing. 5 years since you saved my life. They stood together in comfortable silence, looking out at the city that had been transformed by their work together. The autumn morning cast a golden light across the buildings, including the newly completed Braddock Center for Healthcare Worker Support that stood nearby, a physical manifestation of how far they'd come. Did you ever imagine this? Elliot asked, gesturing toward the center. Even in your wildest dreams? Callie laughed softly. My wildest dreams back then involved making rent on time and keeping Wyatt in college. This wasn't even conceivable. The annual report lying on Callie's desk told the story in numbers. Over 5,000 healthcare workers assisted through emergency financial support. 300 nursing students receiving full scholarships. Housing assistance programs in 27 cities. Childcare centers established at 15 hospitals. Mental health resources accessed by thousands of medical professionals. But the numbers, impressive as they were, couldn't capture the human impact. The relief on a nurse's face when she learned she wouldn't lose her home during cancer treatment. The tears of a paramedic who could finally afford therapy for his PTSD. The gratitude of a hospital custodian whose child's medical bills wouldn't drive his family into bankruptcy. The 5-year gala is going to be quite something, Elliot noted. The governor confirmed this morning. Both senators will attend. And the waiting list for tickets is apparently causing Andrea considerable stress. I still can't believe people pay thousands of dollars to attend our fundraisers, Callie said, shaking her head. It seems surreal. That's because they believe in what we're doing, Elliot replied. What you're doing? You've created something remarkable, Callie. She turned to study him. At 63, Elliot showed his age more than he had 5 years ago. His hair had grayed completely, and the lines around his eyes had deepened. The ongoing battle with his body's attempts to reject her kidney had taken its toll, requiring multiple hospitalizations and treatment adjustments. How are you feeling today? She asked, her nurse's assessment automatic and practiced. You look tired. I had my weekly blood draw this morning, he admitted. The immunosuppressants always leave me a bit drained. Callie nodded, familiar with the routine. Despite the challenges, Elliot had defied the odds. Her kidney continued to function in his body, though not without complications. The threat of rejection remained a constant companion, requiring vigilant monitoring and medication adjustments. Dr. Patel says the new protocol is showing promise, Elliot added, seeing her concern. My creatinine levels have stabilized. Good, Callie said firmly. Because Miles and I expect you to dance at our wedding next spring. Elliot's expression brightened. It's still on, then? Miles survived meeting the entire extended Braddock clan at Thanksgiving. He not only survived, Callie laughed, he thrived. My cousins have officially adopted him. I think they might like him better than me at this point. Their engagement, announced 2 months earlier, had surprised no one who knew them. After 4 years together, Miles had proposed on the rooftop garden of the hospital where they'd first connected. Their relationship had deepened through shared commitments to healthcare advocacy and reform, each bringing unique perspectives to their work and to each other's lives. Speaking of family, Elliot said, how is Margaret doing with the transition to the clinical research position? Callie smiled, pride evident in her expression. She's flourishing. Who would have thought that my mother would become a patient advocate for the same treatment program that helped her? Margaret's journey had been perhaps the most surprising of all. The experimental treatment for Parkinson's had not only significantly reduced her symptoms, but had given her a new purpose. Now she worked part-time with newly diagnosed patients, guiding them through the treatment process with first-hand knowledge and compassion. And Wyatt, still terrorizing first-year medical students. Absolutely, Callie confirmed with a laugh. His reputation as the toughest anatomy instructor in the program is well established. But his students consistently score highest on the exams, so the dean tolerates his methods. Wyatt's path had taken unexpected turns. After completing his undergraduate degree with honors, he'd been accepted to medical school, driven by a new understanding of healthcare inequities. Now in his residency, he specialized in nephrology, a direct result of witnessing his sister's kidney donation and its impact. We should head over, Callie said, checking her watch. The center dedication starts in an hour, and Miles texted that the media is already setting up. Together they made their way to the new building, a modern facility designed specifically for healthcare worker support. The ground floor housed childcare facilities for hospital staff working non-traditional hours. The second floor contained financial counseling offices and emergency assistance coordinators. The third floor was dedicated to mental health resources, therapy offices, support group spaces, and wellness programs. And the rooftop, Callie's particular passion, had been transformed into a peaceful garden retreat where healthcare workers could find moments of tranquility during chaotic shifts. As they approached, Callie saw Miles waiting at the entrance, clipboard in hand, directing volunteers with easy authority. After years as a paramedic, he now served as the Foundation's Director of First Responder Initiatives, developing programs specifically for emergency medical personnel. There you are, he called, his face lighting up at the sight of Callie. Your mother's already inside, holding court with the mayor. And Rodriguez is threatening to tell embarrassing stories about your nursing days if he doesn't get a prime seat. Some things never change, Callie laughed, accepting his quick kiss. Is everything ready? Perfect, Miles assured her. Just waiting for the woman of the hour. The dedication ceremony exceeded even Callie's expectations. Hundreds gathered to celebrate the opening of the center. Healthcare workers, hospital administrators, foundation donors, and government officials. But most meaningful to Callie were the faces she recognized from the foundation's early days. Recipients of the first round of grants, now thriving and often volunteering to help others. When it came time for Callie to speak, she approached the podium with a confidence that would have been unimaginable to her former self, the overworked nurse struggling to make ends meet. 5 years ago, she began, I made a decision that changed my life in ways I could never have predicted. I chose to donate a kidney to a patient who needed it, not knowing that he would one day help me create all of this. She gestured to the building behind her. But what I've come to understand is that the Foundation's work isn't revolutionary. It's simply an acknowledgement of what should have been obvious all along, that those who care for us deserve care in return. As she described the center's services and the thousands of lives that would be touched by its programs, Callie felt a profound sense of purpose. The journey hadn't been without challenges, learning to navigate the complex worlds of philanthropy and healthcare policy, balancing personal life with professional demands, helping Elliot through health crises while building the Foundation's infrastructure. But each challenge had been met, each obstacle overcome, fueled by the knowledge that their work was making tangible differences in people's lives. This center stands as a promise, Callie concluded. A promise that no healthcare worker will face crisis alone, that the compassion they show others will be shown to them in return, that their value will be recognized not just in words, but in concrete support. The applause was thunderous, people rising to their feet in appreciation. As Callie returned to her seat, Elliot squeezed her hand briefly, a gesture that had become their shorthand for moments too meaningful for words. After the ceremony, as guests toured the new facility, Callie found a quiet moment in the rooftop garden with Margaret. Her mother's movements were fluid and controlled, a dramatic contrast to the severe tremors that had characterized her condition 5 years earlier. I was thinking about your father today, Margaret said, gazing out at the city skyline. How proud he would be of all this. Of you. Callie smiled, feeling the familiar bittersweet ache that accompanied thoughts of her father. I hope so. He always said you had a healer's hands, Margaret continued. But he never could have imagined how many people those hands would ultimately help. They sat together in comfortable silence, the garden's tranquility a counterpoint to the celebration continuing below. Callie reflected on the extraordinary journey that had brought her to this moment, from desperate financial struggles to leadership of a multi-million-dollar foundation, from exhausted nurse to respected healthcare advocate. Do you ever regret it? Margaret asked suddenly. The donation? All that followed. Callie considered the question seriously. Not the donation. Never that. The changes afterward were overwhelming sometimes. Frightening, even. But regret? No. Even with Elliot's health challenges? Those have been difficult, Callie acknowledged. Watching him struggle, knowing it's my kidney his body keeps trying to reject, that's been harder than I expected. Elliot's health had become a complex part of their shared story. Despite the best medical care, his body periodically mounted immune responses against Callie's kidney. Each episode required intensive treatment and carried the risk of permanent damage. Yet through it all, Elliot had remained committed to their work together, sometimes conducting foundation business from his hospital bed during particularly severe episodes. But even with those challenges, Callie continued, look at everything that's come from that single decision. Thousands of lives improved. Real changes in how healthcare workers are supported. Your treatment. Wyatt's education. My relationship with Miles. And Elliot himself, not just his physical survival, but the renewed purpose he found. Margaret nodded, understanding. One stone thrown creates countless ripples. Exactly, Callie agreed. And we can't even see all the ripples yet. The medical students Wyatt is teaching. The patients receiving better care because their nurses aren't exhausted from working 3 jobs. The children growing up with parents who can actually be present because they're not constantly worrying about financial disaster. Later that evening, after the guests had departed and the center stood quiet in the gathering dusk, Callie found Elliot in the garden, seated on a bench beneath a young maple tree. Hiding from Andrea's post-event analysis? She asked, joining him. Guilty, he admitted with a smile. I told her I needed to check the irrigation system. They sat together comfortably, their friendship deepened by years of shared work, challenges, and triumphs. I've been thinking about where we started, Elliot said after a while. That night in the hospital when you first suggested donation. I tried to talk you out of it, remember? You were quite insistent, Callie recalled, smiling at the memory. Kept telling me I shouldn't risk my health for a stranger. I was wrong, Elliot said simply. Not about the risks, those were real, but about what was possible. I couldn't see beyond the medical procedure, the physical exchange. I couldn't imagine. He gestured to the building around them. All of this. Neither could I, Callie admitted. I just knew it was the right thing to do. That's your gift, Elliot told her. You see the right path and you follow it, regardless of fear or uncertainty. It's what makes you extraordinary. Callie shook her head, uncomfortable as always with such praise. I'm not extraordinary. I just made a choice, the same choice thousands of people make every day. To help when they can. To give what they have. Perhaps, Elliot conceded. But you made that choice without expectation of reward. You gave without calculation. And that, Callie Braddock, is rarer than you think. As twilight descended, they made their way back inside, through the building that would soon be filled with healthcare workers receiving the support and recognition they deserved. In every space, every program, every service offered, Callie saw the manifestation of a simple truth. That compassion, freely given, creates endless possibilities. 5 years earlier, she had been a struggling nurse, working double shifts, skipping meals to pay her mother's medical bills, watching her brother defer his dreams due to financial necessity. One decision, to donate a kidney to a patient in need, had altered that trajectory completely, creating not just personal transformation, but systemic change that would continue long after her life. The Braddock Center, with its comprehensive support programs. The Scholarship Foundation, educating the next generation of healthcare providers. The Policy Institute, advocating for structural reforms in healthcare worker compensation and benefits. These would endure, helping countless individuals she would never meet. All from one moment of compassion. One decision to help. One kidney given freely. As Callie locked the center's doors, ready to head home to Miles and their future together, she felt a profound sense of completion. Not an ending, the work would continue, evolving to meet new challenges and needs, but a recognition that her impulsive act of kindness had found its fullest expression. She had given a piece of herself to save one life, and in return, had been granted the opportunity to change thousands more. How might your life change if you chose compassion in a critical moment? What ripples could your kindness create that might continue long after you can see them? Our choices, even those that seem small or personal, hold the power to transform not just individual lives but entire communities. The true legacy of kindness isn't measured in days or dollars, but in lives touched and systems changed. If this story of unexpected rewards and lasting impact resonated with you, please subscribe to our channel for more extraordinary true stories of everyday heroes. Your support helps us continue sharing these powerful narratives that remind us all of our capacity to create positive change. Comment below with your thoughts on how a single act of kindness can grow into a lasting legacy.